Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 143 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, joined as always by the co-host Matt Feuerstein. Matt, it's 143. It's the love episode. That's phone slang for love. I learned that from the Howard Stern show all those years ago. Who knows more about love than you and me?
Well, I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. I feel like that's to my benefit.
143 is a... Oh, okay.
No, please. Go on.
I was just going to say 143 is shorthand to say I love you, because one letter in I, 4 in love, and 3 in you.
Okay, and you said this
Little
is
tip for you.
You said this is phone slang for all those years. So this is like pre-text messages, like you type 143 and somebody hears the tone of each number and they realize that someone is saying I love you.
You use it in texting. I should have said texting, not phone. But look, anyone that's familiar with the saga of Sal Governale will be very familiar with 143. This is for Joe Swellstone.
Okay.
That's only for him. He'll appreciate it.
Well, you know what? Good enough. He's possibly our only listener, so it's fine.
Oh, come on.
You know what I found fun about this show that we're doing? I know you haven't said the date of it yet, but it was April 14th, 2007. So this is April 17th, 2025 that we're recording this. So this is one of the rare shows that we're almost on the recording on the anniversary of the actual show. The way our timeline works out, that's very unusual for us.
Yeah.
So feel like one of those darn Conrad Thompson podcasts with the way this all lines up. So go ahead. I was going to say, when are we going to complain about kayfabe? And when are we going to complain about Tony Khan? Because that'll be a great way to get Tony Khan to work with us, apparently.
We do read a bunch of The Observer and occasionally complain about. So we're like 1/15th of the way to being a Conrad Thompson podcast.
How many lies has Dave Meltzer told about Ring of Honor in all the years that we've been covering it?
I mean,
all he does is make things up about. I mean, well, I'll be honest though. I mean, we have been skeptical about most of these attendances, but he's not making them up. He's just getting it from someone else who's lying.
Yeah,
it's different. It's different.
And I guess that brings us to show, because since it's the second half of a double shot, we have no real news between the shows. So we will start off with, get right to it. Fighting Spirit took place April 14th, as Matt has already told us, 2007, at the Inman Sports Complex in Edison, New Jersey, in front of a reported crowd of 700 fans. Matt, they've run a few shows at the Inman Sports Complex. Do you think the slogan for it should be "Get In Man"? I mean, Don't not buy a ticket. Get in, man. Get in, man. Sports Complex.
Well, first of all, I attended this show, as I did a lot of the shows at that venue back then. We always said it was Inman.
Inman,
not in man.
I'm saying it's Inman,
which doesn't sound. I mean, it doesn't like so. Get Inman versus get in man. Yeah, I mean, either way, it's a bad slogan, so it's fine.
Look, I'm Canadian. We pronounce everything different. We pronounce everything the right way. Like,
yeah, just a few seconds ago, you said the word saga.
Yeah,
we would say saga, I think.
I had an American friend who she used to berate me about the way I would say pasta or pasta.
Did you ever see the Wheels Ontario sketch on Kroll's show way back when?
No, I did not, sir.
Yeah, that was like It was, I guess it was sort of like a Degrassi parody, but it involved a character in a wheelchair, going to like a wheelchair high school, but they also, I think it was a character that wasn't in a wheelchair, was transferred to a high school where everyone else was in wheelchairs. Yeah, listen, I didn't write the sketch. Don't cancel me for it. But most of the jokes were involving, Nick Kroll doing an over-the-top Canadian accent.
Yeah. Well, I will just say the one thing we definitely say right is it's Gagne, not Gagne. You hear that, Joe? Every time I say it, it's like poison. It's just coming out of my lips. It stings. It is just one of the many indignities you have forced upon me. Looking forward to having you back on the show. But
just eat your pasta and let's move on, please.
Okay. So a little bit of a note on this show. Dave Meltzer wrote this in The Observer. This will be a good explanation for if those who come into the show kind of blind are wondering. It seems like a lot of familiar names missing from it. Well, Dave wrote in The Observer at the time, the Edison ROH show was a big one because with the TNA Fan Fest, they didn't have access to anyone from the company. With the exception of Austin Aries, ROH has phased down everyone from TNA for the most part. Christopher Daniels and Homicide are being used, but are no longer focal points of the promotion. It remains to be seen how much they are going to do with Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, who are being given the name the Motor City Machine Guns for their return. If their match on April 28th in Chicago against the Briscoes for the titles clicks, I can see them being put in the main tag team adversary spot. The other good thing about bringing Sabin and Shelley in at this point is they are considered by the fan base as TNA wrestlers, where Daniels and Homicide have never left, and at ROH shows, they are ROH guys. It helps.
Wait. Daniels has never left?
Yeah, he very famously got pulled.
Yeah, pretty major leaving situation involving Christopher Daniels. Leaving and returning. Big deals
and
both.
Dave just concludes saying, it helps in getting heat because ROH fans are very willing to accept TNA wrestlers as heel outsiders, even if the promotion wouldn't be allowed to push that as an angle. Daniels was not on this entire weekend, but Aries, who was even on the show the day before, I was like, why is Aries off the show? And then I read this and was reminded, TNA, obviously, they runs their pay-per-views on Sundays, which usually wouldn't be a problem for Ring of Honor since they usually run Friday and Saturday at this point. But I guess there was a literal fan fest. And so no Homicide, no Aries, kind of like a preview of things to come.
Yeah, it's funny the way he says it remains to be seen what they're going to do. And it just becomes, kind of a complete cut the cord situation very, very soon. Which, will give us a chance to talk about, kind of reminisce about Daniels and Homicide pretty soon, which I guess will be a nice little feature on this show. I don't think we're going to do a full on tribute episode to each of them like we did for Danielson, but, I think they're definitely both worth diving into their histories in Ring of Honor for sure.
And the other thing Dave is talking about the Motor City Machine Guns and maybe hey, they could have future plans. I wonder if that was affected by the whole TNA ROH schism, the second one that happens in a few shows when ROH announces they're going to pay-per-view, because I believe it was on the great interview I referenced on the last episode that I used for a few notes, Eric Stevens on the Monumental podcast. And he said this when I was listening to that interview. I believe he said on that interview. And I still, even though he would know more than me, he's a wrestler, I can't quite believe it. And he said something to the effect of he wasn't sure as an absolute fact, but he got the feeling that Gabe was considering a fourth faction to be led by Shelley with Sabin in it in the faction warfare thing. Like the idea would have been he would have brought back Shelley as more than just like a one or two off appearance. I don't know how regular. And it would have been literally all four members of Generation X, each with their own stable instead of the three members. So part of me is almost like, would he do that? Like, I'm not, but it's an interesting thought to consider.
I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't, but there certainly was nothing in the on camera or like live show that ever indicated anything in that direction. But it's a cool idea, and Shelley, did do a really good heel promo while Mark Briscoe was in having a serious medical emergency outside the ring, so it was kind of hard to focus on it, but it was a really good heel promo, so he definitely could have carried that load. But yeah, I mean, if they were ever going to do that, they certainly never got around to even hinting at it.
And it's kind of wild to think of all the people that, like, this is a really interesting show because it's kind of wild to think of all the people who have recently been parts of ROH, usually big parts for a long time in ROH, like time length standards, that are all off the show. Because, like, all right, so Joe, who was a foundational piece of the company, just left a few shows earlier. Danielson's just were coming back to Noah, to wrestling via Noah, but he's been gone for a few months. He's not there. Jimmy Rave is still injured. He'll be back on the next show. Jimmy Jacobs is out injured.
Actually, just to be fair, I double checked and Jimmy Jacobs did wrestle on this night at IWC, I think in Pittsburgh.
That is in fact in my notes later. Yeah, you're right. In fact, I got a fun quiz thing. Oh, not a quiz, but I got a fun thing for you a little bit later. But okay. No. Good.
I like fun things.
It's already overhyped, but all those guys plus no Homicide plus no Aries.
Matt Sydal is not on this show.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that too. Like it's kind of crazy to think of how many
Brent
guys.
Brent Albright.
Wow.
Listen, he's been a major part of the shows recently.
No, you're right. I was going to make a snide joke, but actually, there's been a couple Brent Albright performances in 2007 so far. To be fair, like I'm a little too hard on him because I really did enjoy the tables match, and was surprisingly shocked by that match he had with Homicide on a recent show.
There you go. And BJ Whitmer was not on this show.
Yeah. And so it's a big kind of roster changeover for this week, for this show, especially because at least the last show had Aries and Homicide. But we open this DVD with Nigel McGuinness backstage, who says ROH has asked him to talk a little bit about how important his match with Morishima tonight is for him and for Ring of Honor. This is yet another 2007 ROH promo where it is cut with the guy looking out to the side. Matt, we are now in the middle of April, and they're still doing this sometimes. This tyranny must end. I know you said it ends eventually. I know you're right. We're in April, and they don't do it on every promo, so you kind of get lulled into like, oh, is it done?
A false sense of security.
Ah.
All right, so Trevor, are you telling me that because it's gone on so long, we need to create a time machine to go back and just solve this particular problem? Leave everything
like Orlando Jordan, we need a time machine.
Leave everything else the same, but go back and make sure that these wrestlers face the camera during their promos on these very lightly seen wrestling DVDs from 2007.
It's the only thing affecting my life, really. But so anyway, Nigel says he needs to take us back to 1992 SummerSlam.
Another time machine motivation. He's going to take us back there. Then we're going to go back to 2007 and fix the direction of the camera, and then
I just imagine the camera panning slightly to the right, and there is a time machine. It's like, come on, kids, with the same energy of that old Mr. Show skit where
they go. Is that where they go inside that guy's mother's ass?
Yes, exactly. Where Bob Odenkirk's like, guess what, kids? We're going up my mother's ass. That same energy. That would have been beautiful. Would have been, but
that same energy.
Okay, never mind. Bret Hart and the British Bulldog had what Nigel calls one of the best matches of his generation in Wembley Stadium. Nigel says he was a 15-year-old kid sitting in that stadium, and he then turned to his friend and said one day he was going to be a pro wrestler. He never gave up that dream. He's paid his dues, made his sacrifices, and Nigel's proud to say he's achieved that dream. He is a pro wrestler, but now that he's achieved that dream, what's next? What's left? Nigel says what's left is building a legacy. He says he doesn't really know how much longer he can do this. He's not young anymore. His body feels it. All the guys in the back, their bodies feel it. His shoulder's pretty messed up, and every week he comes home with a new injury. Nigel says it's about time that he stops having great matches and starts winning great matches. Nigel says he's not the type of guy who is going to come out here and say he's the greatest wrestler in the world or the biggest, baddest, or fastest. He knows what he is and what he's not. He's a guy with a dream who never gave up. He says tonight is not just another match, and he's not just another pro wrestler. He's a guy with a dream, and this is special. Matt, I thought this was the best promo we've seen Nigel cut in ROH, and one of the best promos we've seen on ROH DVD in quite a while. For me, like, what really made it was how understated it was. Like, there was nothing in Nigel's story we haven't heard from a lot of wrestlers or athletes. It was very simple and direct. But for me, it was the fact that he didn't try and sell it big like a pro wrestler usually does. Like, he didn't tip it in any emotional direction. He didn't get mad or aggressive or even sad. He didn't even raise his voice. All of that to me kind of made it, like, usually I feel like wrestlers should get emotional, but for me that made it feel more, for this one promo, it made it feel more real. It made him feel like more emotionally vulnerable. It was just a guy like plainly saying that he feels his clock is ticking physically, and if he wants to make the wrestling history books, he has to start winning big matches. And finally, before I give it to you, I will just say it is kind of crazy to see Nigel talk about how he's not a young man anymore, and he doesn't know how much longer he can do this. He was 31 years old at this point, and it's sad and almost spooky that he's laying out how much his body is hurting him, and when that's going to become even more of his story by the end of 2007, by the end of the year we're in right now, and even throughout the rest of his career. Like, in a way, his promo is kind of, my knee-jerk reaction was like, you're only 31, but then when you think of what happens to him, it's like kind of eerily prophetic, because he doesn't make it through even the end of 2010 as a full-time wrestler, and apart from a little farewell tour in 2011, he doesn't wrestle again until Wembley Stadium, ironically, in 2024 for AEW. So this is the rare wrestler promo where they say, my body's breaking down, I don't have much time left to give, where they're actually telling the truth.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of the points that I was going to make. I think, what you could definitely argue this promo lacks some intensity, but I think it made up for it in soul, I guess you could say. Like, it felt honest, like a complete lack of bombast. Like it felt like a person telling the truth about almost everything. There's maybe a couple of things that rang false. The winning great matches, obviously, it's like that's not. But like everything else he said was basically just from the heart. Whereas opposed to just like Nigel McGuinness cutting a promo, it was Stephen Howarth telling the story of his life and becoming a wrestler, and yeah, you mentioned the Bret Hart Bulldog Wembley story. That really did make it cool that, because I didn't remember him telling that story, so it makes it even cooler in hindsight that I got to see him wrestle at Wembley in 2024, knowing all that. And yeah, he's not that young anymore. That line, to people our age does sound crazy because, we're a decade older than he was then. And so it just makes it feel like our mortality is ticking up on us. But at the same time, for like an indie wrestler, sometimes that does feel that way. When you're 31, that's not that young, right? And he's probably did feel that pressure of like, I gotta really make my mark now and make, for lack of a better word, make my money now, right? Because he knew his body was breaking down, and obviously it was. Like you mentioned, he only really wrestled full-time for about 3 more years, and, really not much more than that at all. The only thing I will say that maybe had a little bit of, I could argue that with the logic of it, and some almost like a little bit of a logic hole is when he said, I got to stop having great matches and start winning great matches, as if the idea is he never won. He was pure champion for a year, right? So he was, in kayfabe, he was a very successful wrestler in ROH. He wasn't just a guy who had great matches but always lost. That would really be the only logic hole that I would say in what was otherwise, I agree with you, an excellent promo.
And that brings us to our opening match. Eddie Edwards and Jason Blade defeated Chris Hero and Tank Tolan in 11 minutes, 21 seconds when Blade pinned Tolan with a sunset flip. Before I give it to you, Matt, first thing you might notice, this is, in fact, going right to what you said. Larry Sweeney, despite being, that's the guy we missed, who was on the last show and missed this show. Larry Sweeney, despite being on the ROH show the day before, isn't here tonight. And like you, I looked it up. And he's wrestling Jimmy Jacobs in a match in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, like you said, for IWC on this night. And I was thinking, like, well, didn't Jimmy Jacobs just have to take a sabbatical for knee surgery? And he did, but apparently I guess he must have had a couple scheduled bookings before the surgery. Cage Rats lists this as his final match for 4 months. And this is the little bit of trivia I teased for you, Matt. Let's see if because I don't think, unless you looked it up on Cage Rats, you'll know this in a million years. I could give you literally a million guesses. He had one other match not in Ring of Honor, Jimmy Jacobs, the week before the Larry Sweeney match on this night in IWC. What do you think that match was? Like, you know what? If you get, if you get the promotion, that's not impressive. If you can name the stipulation or his opponent, you get 2 Man of Trophies this episode.
All right, so because this is a trivia question, it has to be something guessable, right? Like, it can't be someone like so obscure that I might not have ever heard of him, right?
You will have heard of them, but it is weird. It is bizarre.
Okay, weird, but not like, okay, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Was it like a bra and panties match? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that I would never guess. Was it a concrete crypt match? Punjabi prison. I'm trying to think of every non sequitur stipulation that I've heard of. Did he wrestle in a Chamber of Horrors match against Abdullah the Butcher?
The stip actually isn't that weird until you consider what promotion it's for.
Okay. I'm trying to think
The wrestler is probably the easier thing to guess, I'll say. But even that is not going to be easy at all.
Okay, so different promotions, like what would have even be a promotion? That would be like if I said like a one that's like kind of incongruous with the promotion would be like if there was like a bra and panties match in Ring of Honor, right? Like that would be like, okay, this doesn't make sense for this promotion. So I'm trying to think of like what the opposite sort of thing would be for like, I don't know, CZW, what the reverse would be, but I feel like CZW has every kind of wrestling, so I don't know.
I have probably tipped this in the wrong way, but
yeah, I don't think it's possible that I'm ever going to guess this without looking it up.
okay. Jimmy Jacobs wrestled in IWA Mid-South in a $5,000 bounty match, which I imagine was for like a show attended by 60 people, which to me just blew my mind. And he wrestled and I believe lost to the Barbarian.
All right. That's cool.
That was his second last match before. And you know what his first match back is after the 4 months he's out, according to Cage Match. I mean, Cage Match doesn't get everything, but he takes on Ultimo Dragon for ICP's Juggalo Championship Wrestling.
Hey, that one I feel like is even wackier. So for the bounty match with the Barbarian, was the bounty on the Barbarian's head or on Jimmy's head? I guess it must have been on Jimmy's head, right? And the Barbarian was coming in to collect the bounty? I'm
not, you know what? Now I've got to look up this whole show because I just have to know. But I got to quickly look it up. But it is, it was like, that is, and you know, that's the charm of IWA Mid-South, that you get the Barbarian versus Jimmy Jacobs in 2007. Like, to me, that is everything you need to know about IWA Mid-South.
Well, that's sort of like a GCW vibe too, right? They do that sort of thing,
yeah.
Right?
So it was IWA Mid-South, April Blood Showers 2007 at Plainfield, Indiana. Doesn't list in attendance. I can't imagine it was very high. I'm just looking for any notable matches. Davey Richards beat Joker. Devin Moore beat Ricochet. The Barbarian beat Jimmy Jacobs in a $5,000 bounty match that went 7 minutes and 17 seconds. Chuck Taylor defeated Z-Bar for the IWA Mid-South heavyweight title in 5 minutes, 42 seconds. And then Chuck Taylor immediately afterwards defeated Tracy Smothers in 50. Again, another very IWA Mid-South match. You know, Chuck Taylor, Tracy Smothers. So that's most of the more notable matches on this show. But hey, Deranged worked the show. So Matt, okay, I got way. Just remember the opening match was Eddie Edwards and Jason Blade taking on Chris Hero and Tag Tillen. What did you think about this?
Well, first of all, yesterday in real time, last episode in our time, the hero match that he had with Morishima against Doug Williams and Nigel McGuinness at This Means War 2 earned him the Matt F. Trophy, you'll recall. And what I liked about him there was that I thought he struck a good balance between the shtick that he'd been doing and then just more serious, like, I'm a good wrestler and showing that. And I think he continued that here. I liked the balance that Tank and Hero struck here, as far as, you know, not giving up their gimmickry or their wackiness, but also not letting it overwhelm the match to the point where it became a comedy match. And as a result, I really enjoyed this. I thought that Toland actually surprised me with how good he was here. I think he could have fit in pretty well in ROH if he had continued to have performances like this in matches like this. I don't know that he ever would have gotten too much above this level, but I think he worked fine here. He never looked like he was out of place with the other guys. As far as Edwards and Blade, I definitely have to tell you, I never would have guessed, even after watching the last show with Jason Blade in that Four Corners match, that he would ever get another big win in Ring of Honor. I did not remember that at all. And do you think that at the point that they booked this, there was even an idea that they were going to push Jason Blade at all, or do you think it was totally about just giving some tension between Hero and Tolan when Sweeney wasn't around?
Well, I believe this was not even the original match because I think it was actually supposed to be like Eddie Edwards teaming up. I believe it might be wrong. It might have been with Eric Stevens. And then I know Jason Blade was supposed to wrestle Rocky Romero. And then the undercard, the top matches all stayed the same, but the undercard got shuffled a little bit. And so I would guess that wasn't the original plan because you have to think in a Jason Blade Rocky Romero match, which was I know for a fact was the originally scheduled announced match for this show for Jason Blade. He was not winning that match.
So I'm surprised that they were the one that they gave him the pin out of everybody if he wasn't even supposed to be in the match. But I thought he looked all right here, and I thought Edwards looked pretty good too. As far as Toland, I like that the Hero and Toland both took time to show off in between their heat segments, with Hero getting in some push-ups and Toland doing some Hindu squats. There was a spot where Toland does basically like a one-arm power slam on Edwards. I also really like the spot where, Toland has those resistance bands and he wrapped them across Edwards' chest and stood on Edwards' back and did some curls. And that's a pretty cool heel spot. And I'm actually surprised that no one has ever done that ever again, as far as I know, because I don't know. I think that's a very funny heel spot. There was also a part that I thought was funny when Edwards did a comeback and he hits a missile drop kick on Hero and he yells "Hero" while he's doing it. I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I thought that in general this was a pretty fun match. I enjoyed the spot where Tolan put Edwards on his shoulder and Hero came off the top with a boot to Edwards' head, and then Tolan just slams Edwards down. There was a spot where Blade hit a super kick that was extremely loud, which I enjoyed. And then the finish, which was Blade, he goes for the sunset flip on Tolan, but Hero is holding onto Tolan's arms, and then Edwards comes off the top with a double stomp to their arms, which allowed the Blade to get the sunset flip all the way and pin Toland. Yeah, I don't know. This was not a great match. It wasn't trying to be a great match. I thought it was a quite entertaining opener, pretty enjoyable, and I thought that the heels were definitely the stars of the match, and Tolan in particular surprised me the most. I'm not saying he's going to win the Madoff Trophy or anything, but I appreciated that he overshot my expectations here.
Yeah, I did not like the match as much as you, but I definitely agree about Toland. Occasionally on the show, I've called a match a TV match as a criticism, and to me, this was kind of one of those matches where, what I always say is what I mean is ROH, by its nature, at this point, you had to pay to see illegally. You either bought a ticket or you bought a DVD. And so you expected most matches to try and give you like an effort worthy of money, where meanwhile, when you're watching wrestling on TV, there's not that feeling that every single match needs to earn a portion of some kind of financial fee. You just paid to see this one show.
Although I will argue that there are people in every audience that paid to see it.
Yeah, you are correct there. Yeah, a live event and stuff like that. You're absolutely right. But this match felt like a match its ambition was to be a TV match, like filler in the middle of a 3-hour episode of, a theoretical ROH weekly TV show. And it really is, there to accomplish two things. Like you said, like further establish the current Chris Hero and his friends act and give two prospects Gabe was looking at a bit of an upset win. And I really like the Hero and Tolan act. Maybe I'll get sick of it eventually because it's very one note, but having not seen this stuff in years and years, having not rewatched it in so long, I really like the goofiness of Hero having a personal trainer. It's such a perfect casting for Tolan. Hero working the resistance bands before the match, doing push-ups before he hits an elbow drop, Tolan doing squats before he does a leg drop. Like, it's all fun stuff. And I noticed I really liked when Tolan did he tried to choke Edwards with the resistance bands, but he couldn't get him around Eddie's throw. He only got him around his chest, and Edwards passed a very it's not really key, but I always appreciate this. When a move doesn't hit, but does hit some other part of your body, do you sell the intended landing point or where it actually landed? And bless his heart, Eddie Edwards sold his chest from these resistance bands. They didn't get around to next. So he's like, I'm going to sell for you, Tank, but it's going to be my chest. You're hurting me with these bands on my chest. And I was like, good for you, Eddie Edwards. But yeah, I like you. Like when I was watching this match, when I was thinking about Tank Tone, I was actually thinking I kind of wished he was booked a little stronger here. Like I don't know how good he'd be bell to bell in ROH because he hasn't been really put in a position to be tested in like a significant lengthy singles match. But he's looked fine in what he's been called upon to do in ring wise so far. I think there might have been a spot or two here where he's just a little bit out of position or waiting for something, and those might not even be his fault. They're just things I noticed. But I think he has a look that stands out in ROH. Like, yes, he's short even by ROH standards, but I think he honestly might have the best physique we've seen from anyone in ROH in the first 5 years of this promotion. Like, I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Depends on your definition of best, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, if we're going from sheer mass, again, his size will limit, but just the definition, like the muscles on muscles, like he just insane body. I also think he has genuine charisma. I love that when the ref was checking the wrestlers for foreign objects before the match, Tank flexes his arms and he goes, "You need to check out the guns too." And I was like, "You cornball!" I thought he's so great in those ways. And I like the idea of ROH having a pint-sized power wrestler. So I would have liked him to do a bit more of that stuff, even than like the one-arm lift you mentioned that he does here, which looks great. Instead, he gets an okay amount of offense, but it's clear in this match he's way below Hero in the pecking order, and he's more here as like a second manager for Hero to occasionally be in a match and take a fall for Hero in a situation like this. And a good example of what I would have wanted more from this match is there's a moment where Tank comes in, and I think it's Jason Blade. Jason Blade tries to arm drag Tank Toland, and Tank just doesn't go over on the arm drag. He's like, just because he's too strong. So he's like really leaning in Blade, and Tank's like, I'm not going over for a fucking arm drag. And it's a really cool, unique spot for ROH, but then immediately Blade just tries again and arm drags him. So I was like, man, I wish you had just stuck with the he blocks it. But I thought Edwards and Blade looked solid here, but they kind of took a backseat personality-wise to Hero's team. Like you, I thought Blade hit a couple of great-looking super kicks here, both due to like they did really perfect beneficial camera angles to make it look great. But also, like you, I noticed those were some of the loudest thigh slaps I can remember hearing. Like thigh slap is one of those
this side of Joe versus Kobashi, at least.
Yeah, like that's one of those weird skills you don't think about, but I was like, I can't remember very often hearing like a thigh slap that loud. It was like a gun. You like the fans in the building literally could be like, "Oh!" Like, and it was like there is an art to slapping your own skin, man.
Yeah, his thigh slaps. I would say his thigh slaps slapped.
Yeah, and remember Jason Blade was also the guy we laughed about a few shows ago where he did a thigh slap in midair at one point for a move. So it's like Jason Blade, he is just the king of the thigh slaps. He loves them, he practices them, he owns them. But
I also love how you totally no-sold my joke. Nice job.
Well, you said I sounded creepy before the show, so now we are even, my friend. But
I did it off the air, Trevor, but fine.
Now I'll bring it all on. No, it was absolutely deserved and warranted. But overall, I thought this was fine as a match. Again, on a 2 or 3 hour TV show filling time before the main event, it fit right in. I thought it was perfectly decent. Also, I think it was an interesting thing to know here is that Hero was pretty over, and when his team lost, you actually heard some boos from the crowd. And there's a great shot that might have to be the pick for this episode, where it was just like the last episode, I randomly paused to take a note, and it was a perfect freeze frame, where it's Jason Blade is like at ringside, right on the barricade, right, and he's celebrating winning the match. And how I paused it, everyone in the crowd, apart from two people more in the distance who are really pumped, look either bored or very unhappy with him. It's just like he's so happy, and there's just this incredible contrast. It's an amazing pick. It might have to be the pick for the show. Next, we join Claudio Castagnoli backstage. He says he's done a lot of thinking as of late, and he's found that the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. He talks about, well, when he and Chris Hero won the ROH Tag Team titles, he put a lot of work into it. Then when Claudio says he was supposed to, quote, go to different places, unquote, which he for some reason he doesn't want to say go to WWE, his mind wandered off, and they lost the tag team titles. Then it turned out he wasn't meant to go to different places, and he was wondering what to do. And at that point, ROH offered him a shot in their all-star team against the Dragon Gate team. Claudio says he trained harder than ever before for that match, and he saw and heard the reaction of the fans. They forgave him that night. Claudio says he did stuff wrong, and then he wondered if he could start doing stuff right. Claudio talks about earning a shot himself, a tag team title shot, by beating Jay Briscoe on a recent show, who he calls great and a superior athlete. He says the only question now is who's going to be my tag partner in that upcoming match. This was a pro that was trying to get across certain story beats. I will just say Claudio Castagnoli, still not a great promo at this point.
Well, okay, so I think this promo's job was mainly to make it official that he's a babyface.
Yeah.
Like this was like kind of his face turn promo. But I will say it did feel like a promo where somebody said, all right, Claudio, practice doing a promo where you tell your story. And that's kind of what this is. It felt like a practice promo where he was telling a story and they just kind of let him do it on a DVD. So the execution wasn't perfect and it did not really build to any sort of logical climax. But you know, it was good practice for him.
Yeah. You have to, that's partly what the indies are for, right? Even ROH.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Next we had the ROH Top of the Class Trophy title match. Pele Primo became the new champion when he defeated Shane Agadorn via pinfall in 7 minutes, 19 seconds, using a roll-up to win the trophy. This is the Rock Austin of ROH student matches up to this point. You've got the two most over students they produced in the early years, and the only two that I would say up to this point that had gotten like any sustained main roster appearances of note, minus maybe the very brief attempt to push Davey Andrews before he fell off the face of the earth into the negative zone. And this is also the first student match that actually, I would say, had been built up for a while, like including a few. I know when I listened to the Honorable Mention episode, you know, they bemoaned rightfully that like a lot of the stuff that they were building that match happened on pre-show student matches that no one would ever get to see. But they did actually have a few segments on the main shows we've been covering recently that, you know, built it a little bit for student matches. I mean, by that standard, it was a ton of build. And I think cage match, and it's also, I will say, I think if you include, I looked at the time for this match on cage match. To be fair on this one, I think this is one of the times cage match is wrong because I don't think the whole match is as long as the 7 minutes. I think that includes the pre-match brawl, because before the match even starts, Shane runs from the back and attacks Pele as he's making his entrance, and they wrestle on the floor for a short time. So I think that includes that before they get in the ring. But still, 7 minutes generally on a main card is kind of unheard of for ROH students. And I thought it was decent. It's a student match. When I watch Hagedorn, I'm always struck by one interesting collection of offense he has. He has the closed fist punches. He has the running hip attacks. He does the inverted headlock takeover into a bulldog choke that Moxley does now. I believe Hagedorn has said that. I think it was Bryan Danielson maybe who taught him that. I would say, like, with that kind of offense, that selection of offense, if Shane was a little stiffer, 40 pounds heavier, and from the southern U.S., he would have been a Death Alley Driver dream wrestler at this point. But
I think he would love that compliment.
Like
you should quote yourself and tweet Shane and tell him that you said that on this episode.
Unfortunately, one of his signature moves is when he's in the corner, he grabs the top rope and he throws both his legs onto his opponent's shoulders, and then he lifts one of his legs up and comes down the top of his opponent's head with a boot. Kind of hard to describe, but he kind of half whiffs on here, which is kind of unlucky timing because I've seen him do that in most matches he wrestles, and I've never seen him whiff on it, and he whiffs on it in probably like the biggest match he's had in Ring of Honor up to this point in some ways. But then Pele gets him back later because Pele does his double stomp, a move he does all the time, and it looks like he got Shane almost in the throat. So Shane also has his shoulder all taped up, which I got a little grumpy watching because I was like, I'm a big believer. If you're the heel, especially if you're going to lose a big match, don't come in with it with a noticeable injury because that kind of takes a little window of the sales. But I was like, except if it was legit. And then, of course, again, I listened to our honorable mention. And in fact, Shane says his shoulder was all taped up because, in fact, it was a very real, legitimate shoulder injury he was coming into this match here. So it was not old Triple Shane here playing his political games. This was a real injury. They pulled out a couple moves that felt extra here. Pelly does this big running jump off the apron into a Rana that sends Hagedorn head first into a guardrail. And at least the camera angle they picked, it looked great. That may have been hiding something there because it was a weird camera angle. But either way, from what we saw at home, it looked good. I really dug Shane doing a tilt-a-whirl into a gut buster instead of a backbreaker. I think that's a cool move. The end has Hagedorn go for his brass knucks, which he often does, but Bobby Dempsey comes out of nowhere to inform the ref of that, so we get a little collective student revenge for all the times before that Shane's cheated his fellow classmates out of matches for the trophy. So overall, I thought this was an average to slightly above average as a match. It's a student match. These guys' execution wasn't always going to be on the level of top experienced guys. And apart from the opening on the outside with the Rana, I don't think they went crazy ambitious over what maybe they're capable of. But I thought these guys are very capable of having short, enjoyable little matches already at this point in their careers. And I felt like that's exactly what they did here. And the crowd really liked seeing Pele win.
I think this is another match where I liked a little bit more than you. I mean, I mostly agree. Like, not everything was perfectly executed, but I thought some of the offense was pretty nice. The back suplex that Hagedorn did on Primo was really good, and Pele is, definitely great at taking moves. I thought there was a pretty crazy spot early where Primo did a running Rana off the apron, right? It wasn't smooth, but it looked more devastating because instead of flipping over, Hagedorn's head just rammed into the guardrail, which I don't know if that's how it was supposed to happen, but it made it look really cool. And actually, I thought these guys were over enough, and I know you'll probably disagree with me based on what you said. I think they should have given them more time. I think they really should have challenged them to say, like, hey, have a 12-minute match, try to make it dramatic. You guys are over. Like, at least over enough for this spot on the card. People care about who wins this match. Like, just, even if it's not perfect, just go for it. Just try it. Because, I mean, when were they going to get a better chance to do that with students than with this particular moment, right?
Yeah.
I think they should have had a 12-minute match and done some dramatic near falls. As it was, I thought that the fact that it was short took away some of the drama. And like you said, I mean, they are students. They were still, fairly green, but I thought they did a pretty good job, and I definitely thought that the finish got really over, and I'm sure you'll describe the ridiculousness of the post-match celebration in a second, but yeah, I think this match, again, not a great match, but gets a thumbs up from me.
And after the match, the post-match is Bobby Dempsey hits Shane with a big cannonball in the corner. Pele poses with the top of the class trophy, and it's great because the trophy might be half of Pele's height or more. Combination of how big the trophy is and, of course, how short Pele is. And then Pele, as I think you were alluding to, Matt, he proceeds to crowd surf, as he's done once or twice before in ROH, but this time, and this is not exaggeration, he crowd surfs around the entire building. He does a complete full lap around the front rows. And it's a cool, unique thing, Pele's crowd surfing gimmick, and I thought it was neat. But also, boy, Matt, sometimes it's hard watching these indie wrestling crowds that are just stricken with anemia and scurvy.
Oh my God.
barely being able to support him. And he's, I love that they had a security guy, did you notice, tail Pele the whole time in the whole lap and basically work as his spotter. Like, oh, you need a little more help here. I'll carry you over like the,
over the corner
entrance gap.
Yeah. Kind of cut through the corners. I just got to say though, you're knocking on indie wrestling crowds. What, you think like in a WWE crowd, all these alpha men and women are going to be just like, just easily just passing him along with the greatest of ease because they're so powerful? Is that what you're saying, Trevor?
No, that's definitely not true. And look, I'll be honest. I would probably not be a great crowd surfing helper myself. I am not the guy.
Are you coming out as having scurvy, Trevor?
Oh, Matt, I definitely need more oranges in my life. That's for sure. But so then Pele and Bobby Dempsey hug, and then I loved this. As Pele walks to the entrance, Shane Hagedorn has been crawling so slow that even after Pele takes a full lap around the ring crowd surfing, which took some time, Hagedorn is still not even back through the curtain yet. He's just at the entrance ramp, and as Pelly walks by him with the trophy, he just steps on Hagedorn's back, and Hagedorn collapses even more. And according to Hagedorn on the podcast, he makes it sound like that was not planned. That was improv. And I thought, what great timing to crawl that slow, and then Pelly to pick up on that and be like, I'm just going to step over this guy as I finally get back here. It was just a great visual, great way to end the whole segment. But next we have Rocky Romero defeating Claudio Castagnoli via pinfall in 10 minutes, 37 seconds via a small package. So again, this was supposed to be, I believe, Rocky versus Jason Blade. Card got shuffled around a little bit, the undercard. What'd you think about it, Matt?
Well, I thought that it was kind of had an odd story in the sense of the story of the match was just that it was totally even. It just went back and forth, back and forth. But I thought it kind of worked for them. I think the match lost some steam as it went on. Like it started out pretty hot, lost some heat, but I thought there were some cool spots throughout. Like in comparison with let's say the Briscoe versus Castagnoli match from the night before, I think that I liked the Briscoe match more. I think it came together better. It had a hotter finish, but I think this match was more consistent. Just obviously Rocky was going hard with the kicks. Claudio did some of his big moves. Rocky got to do a little bit more personality stuff, and Claudio bounced off. Like there was a spot where Rocky does the Asuka dance thing, and Claudio mocks it. So Rocky goes, "You think you're funny, huh?" And then Claudio replies, "Yeah, I am funny." I thought that was a good little interaction. I thought there was a funny moment. I don't know if you heard this when Romero was doing his entrance, where someone in the audience yelled to him, "You're no Ricky Reyes," and I just have no comment on that. But I thought it was funny that someone said it. Early on, they were like really working the mat in a way that I don't think we've really seen much of since Danielson went on the shelf. So I appreciated that, but didn't really last long. It got much more into like the bigger moves. There was a spot where Romero actually does a few big kicks to the back, and then the ref only counts 2. So Romero spits at the ref, which I was like, that's a technical foul. You can't spit at the ref. Also, did you notice that Romero hit a 619 and Prazak did not identify it by name?
And the crowd booed it.
Yeah, very, very unusual. That was right after Mysterio won the title at WrestleMania 22. Was there like a Mysterio backlash at that point? It's possible. I don't really remember. But
I don't remember. So like that's the thing. There might have been some context, but I was like, wow, like they're booing doing a Rey Mysterio move.
Actually, you know what? I'm wrong. He won the WrestleMania 22 was a year earlier, so I don't know what Rey was up to in April of 2007. So I don't know why he would have been booed. But yeah, there was a spot where Romero tried to leap over the top rope to the floor, and Claudio hit a European uppercut on the way down, which I thought was pretty cool. At that point, they just sort of started trading moves. Claudio blocked a kick, did a Ricola bomb for a 2 count. Romero escaped the Apamari water slide and got a spinning head scissors into the Fujiwara armbar. Then there was a spot where Romero leaped up and Claudio caught him, chucked him into the lights, and hit the European uppercut on the way down. Then Romero escaped the Apamari water slide again with an arm drag, and that's kind of led to the finish. He landed on his feet after a German suplex, kicked Claudio in the head, but Claudio immediately came back with a big bicycle kick. But Romero popped up to his feet, and after some reversals, hit the sudden inside cradle for the flash pin. Yeah, like I said, the match was not really memorable. Nothing stood out, but I thought it was pretty solidly worked. And I'd say a pretty easy 3-star match, maybe 3.25. I would give it. And I do like that in some of these undercard matches, they're letting guys just trade clean wins again instead of trying to come up with some gimmickry for the finishes. It makes things unpredictable, even though it kind of keeps people at the same level. If guys are going to be in the mid card, you might as well at least let them all get some wins. You know what I mean? So I don't really mind that degree of parity booking. As long as it's not at the top of the card, I think it's fine. So like I said, like 3-star match-ish, but I enjoyed it.
it's funny that sometimes this happens to us where one of us will hear the other talking and be like, oh, I kind of don't agree. And then they'll say we would have given a star rating for this match, which we don't always do. And then go, well, that's also the star rating I would have given it. Because like I was about to say, I think I like this match a bit more than you, but you said 3, maybe 3.25. I would have given this, I think, a strong 3.25. So we're not very different, but I do think I enjoyed this match more than you. This match started to me as kind of just a decent but standard random mid-card match, the kind you might expect from two guys that have no real issue going into the match or coming out of it. But to me, it just kept getting better. It didn't become a classic or even quite a hidden gem, but I do think it's like that good 3.25 stars. And I think it was on pace to become even better because it was the kind of match where when it ended, I was disappointed because I thought they were really starting to deliver the goods. I just wanted a bit more of it. You don't get a story here or deep psychology or selling, but I thought these two had pretty good physical chemistry, if that makes sense. Like they had a match in PWG weeks earlier, and now I'm curious to see that because I thought these guys just physically, they flowed well together. There are simple spots like Claudio tossing Rocky into a hot shot on the turnbuckle, but it becomes impressive because Rocky basically flies halfway across the ring to get to the turnbuckle. And then I put this on Twitter. They do one of the wildest, most ambitious sequences I've ever seen where, well, not ever seen, but seen in a while, where Claudio has Rocky flat on his back with a double knuckle lock. Claudio tries to put his body on him. Rocky catches him with his feet, which pushes them both back to their feet while holding the double knuckle lock. And then while still in the double knuckle lock, Rocky leaps while holding it to the top rope, balances on the top rope, jumps from there onto Claudio's shoulders, does a victory roll on Claudio, which becomes a rolling cradle that ends with Claudio then being launched over the top rope on the other side of the ring to the floor. It was just like a wildly ambitious thing to see on like a third from the bottom random undercard match. Rocky threw a billion kicks in this match. I liked the payoff late when Claudio finally caught one and he while he was on one knee, and then he turned into a Ricola bomb. And this match also had one of the most impressive pop-up power European uppercuts I've ever seen. Often with pop-up moves, the pop-up starts with the guy being, well, like popped up, being launched from the canvas. So they're helping in the pop-up. They're jumping. But here, Claudio caught Romero as Romero's like charging at him. He's holding Romero up off the canvas so Rocky's feet aren't touching the mat. And then Claudio just hurts him up and throws him on like another few feet in the air with no assist from Rocky so he can European uppercut him on the way down. I thought, what a crazy display of power. So yeah, the fun of this match to me isn't anything more or less than two guys clicking and doing a couple of things together that maybe a lot of other people couldn't do against one of these guys. I kind of wish ROH had booked a rematch, but looking at KHH, these two guys don't have another singles match against each other until 2023 in the Tony Khan era of ROH, where on ROH on Honor Club, when Claudio was the world champion, he defended against Rocky. But on commentary, Dave Prazak said Austin Aries is on the shelf tonight. He felt a little woozy after Rocky Romero's kicks last night. So that's the way they explain Austin Aries not being on the show due to the TNA Fan Fest. And they're clearly right now trying to build up with Rocky eliminating Aries the night before and Rocky getting a win here. They're trying to build a Rocky and Aries matchup, which we will get before Aries leaves, I think. We then joined Sarah Del Rey backstage, who says last night Daisy Hayes got lucky. Tonight, she's going to send a message to her that she's the best women's wrestler in the world when she takes out anyone they put in the ring with her. And that brings us to a non-title tag team match. El Generico and Kevin Steen defeat Eric Stevens and Jay Briscoe in 24 minutes, 44 seconds when Generico pins Mark Briscoe. You might go, what? How'd he get in there? After a combination of a package pile driver from Steen and a brainbuster from Generico. This was one of those matches where there are parts of it I really liked and parts I didn't care for. It's also a big, involved, dramatic storytelling match of a type that ROH didn't do often at this point. We have Jay Briscoe team up with Eric Stevens, which seems a little random, but the story is Mark is still injured, especially with Kevin Steen re-aggravating Mark's head injury the night before. Commentary even says Mark's at a hospital in New York. He didn't make the trip to New Jersey. the first thing I really like about this match is Jay Briscoe reacts appropriately to that. He's pissed off at Steen before the bell. He's pissed off in the early minutes of the match. He's attacking Steen whenever he can. Steen's not legal in the early portions of this match. He's on the apron, but every time Jay can run at him and do a move to him while he stands on the apron, he's doing it every chance he gets. And I love that Jay carried the emotion of the previous night's angle into the night. And it's also an early example in ROH of the fun, unique dynamic the Steen Generico team had, right? Where Steen's an absolute asshole and Generico isn't, but he is also at the same time Steen's pal. So Jay doesn't go after Generico in this match with the hate and urgency he's going after Steen with, and Generico isn't taunting Jay the way Steen is. And it all makes sense because it was Steen that re-injured Mark the night before. It wasn't Generico who did that. And Steen's such an amazing dirtbag heel. Like, when Stevens is out of the match, but Mark isn't in yet to replace him, he gets in Jay's corner, asks Jay for a tag. At one point, he shadow boxes a phantom partner in the corner. When there's a dueling Steen and Jay chant, he always covers Jay's ears just during the Jay part. Like, he's just such a great asshole. And then fairly early on, Eric Stevens gets taken out of the match. And Rocky Romero comes to the ring to distract the ref. Roderick Strong and Davey Richards come, and they take out Stevens by powerbombing him into the barricade to continue that feud from the night before. My issue here was Stevens could have done more. He could have been more impressive before he got taken out. He does get to do some stuff in the match before that moment. He does a couple choo-choo spots. He does some decent enough work with Generico, and then he and Jay do a couple trademark Briscoe brother double teams like the double tackle, and that's all cool. But for a guy you're trying to push, I wish he would have made just a bit more of an emphatic statement before he had to get taken out. And I also kind of wish it took more than a power bomb into the barricade to take him out of the match, because that's not a minor move, but that's also a move that you might like just occasionally see in a match, in the middle of a match in Ring of Honor. Then they have Jay go at it 1-on-2. And that's kind of cute and clever, right? Because they're redoing the inadvertent story they had Mania Weekend where Mark got legitimately hurt and Jay had to wrestle the rest of the match by himself. And so they're kind of recreating it in a fictional way here. But my issue here is this section of the match is kind of, and I'll be interested to hear what you think, Matt, it's kind of not that great to me. It's similar to my issues with the Faction Warfare elimination tag we covered on the last show, which is if you have the numbers advantage, I really want to feel it. I want to see you like brutalize the guy that's outnumbered. And the handicap segment here, it feels pretty long. It's not quite vicious enough for my taste. Jay's never out of it enough. In fact, like after a while, Jay makes basically a full comeback 1-on-2, and then Steen and Generico get the advantage again. And then when it finally has the big reveal of Mark Briscoe comes through the crowd in street clothes, gets on the apron and makes the tag and joins the match, I want it to feel like in that moment, Jay was in the most desperate moment imaginable and Mark inspires him. But it was just like, it was a double down. It was just, he and I think Generico were down in the ring. And, then Mark comes out. But then Mark does come to the ring. It's great again, I felt like Kerry Silken, the students, they all try and stop Mark. He makes the tag. We get a rare appearance from Mama Briscoe in the crowd, looking concerned. And then Mark does some of his trademark offense in street clothes. And by that, I mean, not just a t-shirt, but fucking jeans and shoes. And I thought that was a really cool visual. And the crowd's going big for it. There's this energy because Mark is selling big when he gets hit in the head, except near the end, we have this great sequence where Generico, where he's taking Olay kicks and half Nelson suplexes, and he's hulking up before he's finally brought down. And is it great that Mark was already back wrestling and taking head drop spots after a serious concussion? Probably not. Was it exciting? Yes. So it's hard for me to rate this match because I liked elements at the start and the end, but the execution of some of the middle beats of the story of this match I felt could have been tightened up. They could have been better. I feel like there's a shorter version of this match where you hit all those beats harder, like where Stevens is more dominant until he gets taken out by a more brutal attack, and the Jay beatdown is shorter and more one-sided and ends more dramatically. And I think if you do all that, that's a great match. I felt this match was like a mixed bag good. But I might be crazy, Matt, because I feel like a lot of people online don't think this is an amazing match, but I think a lot of people like this match more than I did.
Yeah, I like it more than you. I thought it was a great match. I thought it was a low 4 stars. And I think the criticisms that you had that I agree with are that I think it doesn't really make sense for Eric Stevens to be taken out by a powerbomb into the guardrail, given all the moves we see in ROH matches. I think they should have done a lot more than that. And I do think that the 2-on-1 segment went on for a little too long and wasn't quite dynamic enough to justify the length. And so the heat kind of died a little bit during it. But otherwise, I thought that Stevens did make a good impact when he was out there. I thought the sequence at the beginning with Stevens and Jay against Generico and Steen was very good. And then everything once Mark came in was excellent. And I thought it brought it up to a 4-star match just because of the great drama. The best parts during the 2-on-1 segments were stuff like where Steen went over to Jay's corner and pretended to be Jay's partner and reached out his hand all like mockingly. He did that a couple times. I thought that stuff was very good. I thought Steen was great, obviously, throughout. I thought this was really good when I saw it live, but it was like in the building. But I remember it being very colored by like, Mark shouldn't be doing this, like when Mark would take those suplexes on his head by Generico, that was genuinely scary in the moment because he really did have a real serious concussion a few weeks earlier. Like obviously the angle the night before was just a work, but he was only a few weeks past a major concussion. I cannot.
And just to be clear, like ROH promoted this weekend, not just even before they did the injury angle the night before, as Mark will not be wrestling this weekend. Like They openly said, like he'll be back for the next double shot at the end of the month, but they were openly like selling, like Mark isn't ready to come back.
Yeah, it was a true surprise that Mark got involved in this match, and a even bigger surprise when he started taking bumps on his head. And I'm wondering if there was if Gabe even knew that he was going to take those bumps on his head. Like I could easily see a situation where Mark told Gabe, like, I'm going to be in the match, I'm going to do some offense, but I'm going to take it easy. And then in the match, he was like, yeah, do the exploder. You know what I mean? And Generico and Steen obliged. But it was crazy. And in hindsight, it's not as, traumatic to watch because obviously Mark is, we're 18 years later and Mark obviously did not end his career because of that injury, right? So It's easier to look past it now. But of course, a few months later, concussions became a much more kind of ever-present specter of fear running through the wrestling industry, even more than they had ever been before. So there's two sides of that. But all the spots, the Mark's real injury made this so exciting and so dramatic and so emotional. And I think that certainly if someone wanted to complain about somebody just joining the match when they weren't in the match and that lack of logic, I wouldn't argue with them. I think that's a fine thing to complain about, but at the same time, it's wrestling, and obviously that shit happens, and so sometimes you just let it slide, and I thought this told such a good story, and it really got over Steen and Generico, but especially Steen, as these, this pretty threatening duo, and this guy who was kind of unscrupulous and dangerous. So I think even though that match that they had at the 5th anniversary or the 5th year festival Philly kicked off the rivalry between Steen and Generico and the Briscoes, this weekend kicked off the feud. And man, it's going to be a great feud. And so I really like this a lot. I thought this was a 4-star match.
So, Matt, we got a couple of reportings about this match. First, we'll go to F4W Online and wait for the last sentence ending because, we talk about sometimes we disagree with Dave. We sometimes poke fun at Wade, but Brian Alvarez, I've said it before this year. He got it once or twice from me. No one escapes the wrathful eye of this podcast, Matt, and you'll see at the very end. So, this is Brian Alvarez for Figure 4 Weekly. He wrote about this match. Kevin Steen and Generico beat Jay Briscoe and Eric Stevens when Generico pinned Mark Briscoe. Yes, Mark Briscoe was back. No Remorse Court came out and attacked Stevens, leaving Jay all by himself. Problem was, Jay was a poor babyface in peril, and no one cared much that he was being beaten 2-on-1. Mark then returned through the crowd and street clothes to make the save. He had gotten clearance from the doctor to return on Thursday, but they held off the news for dramatic purposes. While he did get clearance, personally, I think that head injuries are nothing to fuck around with, and he should have stayed out of action quite a bit longer. It gets worse. They played the head injury into the storyline and had to drop him on it multiple times to finally get the pin. I guess I'll have to see it to better determine how safe or dangerous it was, but just reading about it, I abhor the idea. Fans weren't much into it either. Matt, that last sentence is categorically untrue. The fans were really into Mark coming back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, live and on video, definitely clear. I obviously you see Brian likes to take pot shots at the Briscoes in this era, and he said that Jay was a bad face in peril. I will say that the 2-on-1 segment did not have the most heat, but
Yeah.
you can't argue with the ending. When Mark came in, the crowd was going nuts for that.
And also, I don't think like you people who just heard me, I had some problems with the middle part, the face in peril, but I don't even know if that's all Jay's fault. I don't know if I would single him out or just because I don't know who's involved in the structure of that section of the match. But I think, obviously Brian did not see it at this point, but whoever told him that, the crowd came alive when Mark came in. And I don't doubt that there were some people, like you said, who were concerned about Mark, especially when they saw him, but they popped big for Mark.
I was concerned about Mark, so I know there were people there that were, at least one.
But saying fans weren't much into him at the end, the crowd
crazy.
came back alive when Mark, joined the match. And then we'll go to Dave on the Observer, and he wrote, Mark Briscoe seems to be fine. The decision was made earlier in the week to pull him from the shows after he suffered a concussion when he landed headfirst on the floor doing a shooting star press from the top rope outside. By midweek, Mark, Jay, and even their mother told Gabe Sapolsky that Mark was good to go, so they ended up using him in a more physical role in Edison, New Jersey, and he'll be back wrestling at the next set of shows. So I wonder is that why Mark's mom was there, where they're like, look, you can bring your mom, we'll bring our mom there, she'll it's kind of funny that Dave reporting that, and Mark's mom is at the show, so I don't know if that was part of the plan, was look, Mark's mom will be there with him. She'll check on him every minute before the show. And
I would bet that is exactly what it was. Yeah.
But it is amazing, and almost as amazing as I forgot. Jay, a little bit of criticism for Jay on this match. Jay, I thought, hit a great looking blockbuster neck breaker in this match. He doesn't always pull that out. Great looking one in this match. So kudos there. After the match, Steen leaps on Steenerico. He's hugging him. He's laughing. And I hate that on some episodes of this podcast, it is hard for me to find one cool, unique, striking frame grab to use as the image for the episode of the pod. And between this, Mama Briscoe, and the Jason Blade crowd no sell, I already have 3, and we're not even in the middle of the show.
You don't know which one you're using yet, right?
I think it will be the Jason Blade one, but they're all good.
Okay.
Students, although you obviously have say in it too, if you want to pick a specific one. But Jay and the refs run in to check on Mark, who is selling being hurt again. Steen is showered with booze, and he climbs on the turnbuckle and blows snot on Jay, who is still selling on the floor. And then Steenerico checks on Mark out of concern, but Steen pulls him off angrily, asking him, what are you doing? And then Steen walks over and blows some snot on Mark. Steenerico then goes back to check on Mark again, and then Steen finally joins and checks on Mark as well. But he patronizingly goes, he's got a pulse. So he, again, being an asshole. Again, this match was a great way, everything during and after, to really establish that Steenerico and Steen dynamic to fans. If you didn't really know them before, that thing of, Steenerico is very much a babyface, and Steen is a complete asshole, and yet somehow it works, right? It's just, I thought they did great there. So that brings us to Doug Williams defeating Colt Cabana via pinfall in 12 minutes, 21 seconds with the Chaos Theory German suplex. Cole gets a bunch of streamers and a big chant before the start of the match. Bobby Cruz does title match style ring introductions for this non-match, which has no title at stake. It's in the mid card, so they're doing it because it's called a big special match for Cole. And he, in fact, announces this as Colt's final East Coast appearance for Ring of Honor, which is true because he does have 2 more shows after this, but they're in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Chicago. So this is the it for him and the end of the East Coast. And this isn't just Colt's final East Coast appearance or his 3rd final match in just part of the Ring of Honor run. Unbeknownst to fans at the time, because it wasn't announced like this, it probably wasn't known to be this, it also ends up being Doug Williams' final match in the Gabe Sapolsky era of Ring of Honor. After this, I don't think he wrestles for ROH again in any way until 2015 when he wrestles 2 co-branded ROH/Preston City Wrestling shows in the UK, which I wouldn't really count as canon ROH shows. So really, this is his last ROH show until 2018 when he challenges Silas Young for the ROH TV title at an official ROH show in the UK, which I also believe stands as the last match Doug Williams ever has in ROH, period. And I believe he's retired now.
So this is his last match for Ring of Honor in America.
Yeah. So yeah, this is and again, I'm sure no one knew that at the time. So we can talk a bit, obviously, about Doug Williams' his contributions to Ring of Honor, but I guess we should get to the match first. Matt, what'd you think about Doug Williams versus Colt Cabana?
We are fully in. Cabana wrestles completely safely and doesn't take any chances because he is going to WWE mode. So that's what this match was. It was a total, like, lighthearted chain wrestling match with almost no intensity, a bunch of comedy peppered in. I would have liked to see what these two guys could do with a more intense, British wrestling style match that they maybe would have had if it had been like 2 or 3 years earlier. But instead, it was not that. So, I wouldn't say it was a total comedy match, but it kind of was. Most of the comedy is Cabana, like, verbalizing his emotions, when, and then, like, does, like, a bit where he pretends not to understand the ref telling him to break an armbar when Williams is in the ropes, and then when he's arguing, he accidentally knocks the middle rope into Williams's crotch. There's a spot where he yells cover when he covers, and then when Williams does a neck bridge, Cabana yells he has all day, and then Williams responds that he also does. So Cabana sits on Williams' stomach and then wiggles his butt until finally the neck bridge collapses. There's a spot where Colt goes for a double knuckle lock, but he yells high five in a Borat voice. Like, so, just that kind of stuff. There's a spot where Williams eventually tries to get Cabana in a surfboard, and Cabana refuses very vocally. They do like a wacky double pin and simultaneously lift each other's legs up. Then there's a spot, like, Cabana's been enjoying getting the ref involved in recent matches. He gets the ref to a do-si-do with Williams, and then somehow Keener grabs Colt in a waistlock, and Colt yells, "You ain't Doug." So Keener hands the wrist to Doug. Oh, wristlock, not waistlock. So then Keener hands the wrist to Doug Williams. There's a spot where Cabana yells flying asshole, and he hits it in the corner on Williams, but then he yells flying asshole again as he hip tosses Williams out of the corner. And I was thinking, Williams is the last guy he should say that about. He comes across as being just such a nice guy, right? But yeah, I mean, that's basically the whole match. Eventually, Williams blocks a Colt 45 and then hits the Chaos Theory, and that's that. Like, no drama whatsoever. Just total lighthearted. As a result, I found this to be mildly entertaining, but otherwise completely forgettable. I wish they had done more with it, but they didn't, and as a result, it was just what it was. Nothing much. Not my favorite way. If Colt's going to go out like this, I get it. Not my favorite way for Doug to go out, but what are you going to do?
I like this match more than you. The night before this, we got Colt versus Delirious in a match that I enjoyed a lot, that showcased Colt's ability to do like a 100% silly, nothing but comedy match. This night, I thought, showed off another side of Colt, which is the guy who can have a match with a lot of comedy threaded into it. You described a bunch of it, into him doing real wrestling. Like, there are a lot of Colt jokes here. Sadly, including, like, he makes a bunch of asides to the crowd that we can't hear, but the crowd's laughing at them. And it's like, I always hate that, where it's like, well, shit, you're doing a bunch of crowd work that I can't hear. That always sucks. But we also get a match of some of that Brit-style grappling, and a match, it's almost entirely about trading holds and pinning combinations. Simple stuff like Colt having to spend a full minute trying to get different ways to get out of an arm lock. I enjoyed it to the point that in the final minute where they were like, okay, we have to start hitting some of our higher impact signature moves, I was thinking, no, actually, I want you guys just to do holds and pin attempts the whole match. Like, to me, that was the fun of the match, that uniqueness, that was the hook. Even if it, like you were saying, it might have also been by design for Colt of like, I'm not taking any serious risks when I'm about to get into WWE. But this match was also maybe a first for me, where Doug Williams at one point, he tries to lock Colt in a surfboard, which leads Colt to go, oh no, I've seen Dragon do this. And then after a brief period of Colt resisting and struggling before Doug can lock in the surfboard, Doug just gives up, lets him up, and you never see a surfboard in this match. I don't know if I've ever seen a match where the surfboard is teased, the guy fights it off, and that's it. Like, it was kind of an amazing little thing. See, so I thought this match was really fun for what it was. I thought it was like a strong good or low very good. I really liked that we got to see two of the different sides of Colt on this weekend. The guy who could do a match that is nothing but comedy, and the Brit wrestling, chain wrestling fan who can mix some comedy in. We haven't gotten that Colt, that third kind of match Colt can wrestle, which is that straight up serious, actiony, modern US indie, more high impact match, because he can do that too. But on this farewell mini tour, I'll say, I kind of wonder if that's even something he should do, because I feel like if you're saying goodbye to Colt and you're seeing him one more time, to me, you kind of want to see him do comedy, right? Because he can do a lot of things, but to me, if I was saying goodbye to Colt, I kind of want to see him do comedy. Maybe you disagree with that. I'm not sure, but I can see why. But here's the interesting thing, so I kind of disagree with the Colt thing, but when I frame it as this is in some ways Doug Williams' last match for Ring of Honor, then I completely agree with you. Like, does that make sense? Like I don't mind this as one of Colt's last matches. I think Doug Williams, I would have liked to see him go out with a bit more of a barn burner.
Yeah,
so
you are also obviously famously the high vote on the Nigel McGuinness Colt Cabana European Rounds match. And while I certainly don't think this match has a negative reputation the way that one does, I could see why this would appeal to you, because I generally would say this was a perfectly fine, solid match. There's certainly nothing bad at all, like well done. But I just didn't really get my juices going, and I could see why it would for you, given your penchant for that.
I'm sorry you didn't get juiced, and maybe you need to talk to Tank Tolan, but I will just say, for those of you that don't know what Matt's talking about, that's like one of the matches we had the biggest disagreement on, like the widest chasm between our opinions, was the Nigel Colt European Round match, which I think is like, I thought that was like a 4-star match. And when Matt says like, I'm the high vote on that match, that includes the participants in the match, because after that podcast, someone asked Colt about that match and he said it was crap. So I like it more than the people in the match probably liked it. So I will freely admit once again, I am the outlier on that match. That is the textbook one match I like more than probably anyone on this planet. But, so this is Doug Williams in a lot of ways. His final match is the final one we'll ever cover on this podcast. And Matt, I think you should go first. Like, talk a bit about Doug Williams, because I think we both probably agree, right, that he is kind of maybe not quite as admired for his early impact on the company in those lean first couple of years in some ways, right?
Well, you can go back and check the record. I was a huge fan of Doug Williams' work in the first couple of years of ROH. It was just a pleasure to watch him do his mat wrestling and his chain wrestling, and especially when he had a game opponent. You could name a lot of really good Doug Williams matches from the first year, whether it's match with Daniels at Night of Champions, the 30-minute Iron Man match that he had with Bryan Danielson at Scramble Madness, I think it was. That was a hugely underrated match. He was in the first title match, the 4-way match to crown the Ring of Honor champion, crowning a champion. I think he was Samoa Joe's first ever ROH title defense, if I'm not mistaken. Or at least like this first like official title defense main event, because I know Joe might have randomly put the title on the line in a 4-way at Epic Encounter. We're still not actually clear if that was a title match or not, I think, to this day, or if he just said he would give the winner the belt. But some would say it was the first ever title defense Joe ever had, and that was a good match too. But even just beyond the matches, he never tried to get fancy. They never really did much with him as a character. But he just always delivered, and he was always over, and you always knew that you could get a great match with him. Really good match with Alex Shelley too, right? For the original Pure title finals, right? That was another really good one. He was, like I said, because he was never really involved in storylines, and he was in and out. People don't think of him as much as about these early ROH icons, but he was a big part of some of those early shows, and like I said, always delivered. He had a style that no one else was doing, especially before Colt and Nigel really got their feud going in 2005 too. So he stood out from everybody else as well. Really, it was mainly Danielson was the guy that would kind of go toe to toe with him, and then Shelley kind of brought it a little bit too. But really, he was the man that was doing the British style in the early days, and he did it really well. I would have been interesting to see if he was a bigger part of ROH and maybe was able to have a more extended feud with Nigel or with Danielson once Danielson was champion, or got involved in with Aries and Roderick Strong when they got over and became bigger parts of the show. Because he was as good as any of them, in my opinion. And I guess in some ways it was nice to have him be that special guest because it still felt special when he was around. When was the last time he was in before this, like this weekend? Was it 2005?
If you vamp, I can look because I'm already at Cage Match to answer another one of your questions. So
I can't remember him being there past like.
So we're talking the U.S., right? Because he was in the UK stuff.
Yeah. U.S. Ring of Honor shows. I can't remember him being there. Yeah, I know he was there for Anarchy in the UK and Unified, right? So. But he was not at the UK shows that they just did at the 50th Festival, right?
Yeah, you're right. So,
so New Frontiers was New Frontiers in June 2005 the last American ROH show that he was on?
I am looking. His last match before this in the U.S. for Ring of Honor was against Homicide for Nowhere to Run.
So before New Frontiers, then. Yeah, okay. So May 2005. There you go.
Yeah.
It had been almost 2 years since he had come to the U.S. for Ring of Honor. So he was definitely not really a part of the promotion at this point. This was a total like special guest appearance.
Yeah, he was basically a full-time Noah guy at this point, as he would continue to be for a while. And then right when the Noah thing ended, he ended up being like a full-time TNA guy. So, and yeah, he doesn't really make his way back to Ring of Honor after this. So you said a lot of things I think I would have also said about Doug. I looked up, you were wondering if he was Joe's first title defense. Cage Match has the first matches Joe has after winning the title. Like, Joe wrestles a whole bunch of matches after he wins the ROH title that don't appear for the title, because his first match after he beats Xavier for the title in ROH is a 6-man tag as part of the group versus the Hit Squad and Homicide. Then he's in a 4-corner survival, which I believe was non-title with
Cole. Well, that was the one I just mentioned, right? And it was the idea is he said, like, if anyone can beat me, I will give them the belt. And so we were like, at the time we were like, is this a title match or was he just offering the belt? We were not clear.
And then he wrestles Hot Stuff Hernandez at Epic Encounter. And Cage Match, I don't remember. Cage Match does not list this as a title match. The first match Cage Match lists as a title defense for Joe after he beats Xavier for it is the Doug Williams match at Round Robin Challenge 2. So if we're going by that, like you saying.
I was going to ask, where was that 6-man match that you mentioned?
That was Night of Champions. It ended in a no contest.
That was before he won the title from Xavier.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was, he wrestled. I didn't even notice. He wrestled twice on that show.
Yeah,
you're correct. So that would not be. In fact, you. This is why, Matt. One of the many reasons why you are so great is your memory is like 80% better than mine. So, yeah, I thought Doug Williams was an underrated part of the earlier years of Ring of Honor when he came to it semi-frequently. He was more of like the special guest star. He made it to the finals of the initial ROH title tournament. He was part of that 60-minute 4 corners Iron Man match that low-key won to crown the first ROH champion. Wrestled Danielson, like you said, multiple times, including that 30-minute Iron Man match that main evented a show in the first year, Scramble Madness. He challenged Joe, like you said, for the ROH title multiple times. He worked Punk, he worked Homicide, he worked Shelley's, he worked Aries. He was a short-lived ROH Pure champion in the fallout of AJ Styles, the first Pure champ, getting pulled by TNA. And I think he was one of those guys where if he didn't live in the UK and didn't work so much in Noah, I'm sure Gabe would have loved to have had him around more. It's maybe easier to take him for granted at this point because I would say at this point, 2007, he just seems like another good worker. But if you go back to that first year of Ring of Honor, he really stood out because not just with his size, that he was bigger and bulkier than a ton of guys on the U.S. indie scene at that point, but I felt like when we rewatched that first year of Ring of Honor, there's a ton of guys in the early shows of Ring of Honor that have a lot of potential that will become great wrestlers. But in terms of like that mechanics and the polish, it was really clearly like Danielson, low key, Christopher Daniels, and then after a few shows, AJ Styles coming in. I felt like we're in a tier above everyone else in those aspects. And whenever Doug Williams came in, he would work them and he would not look out of place at all in those respects, right? Like he looked like he fit in with the cream of the crop of the U.S. Indies. And yeah, maybe eventually everyone caught up to them, or a lot of people caught up to them to some degree. They narrowed the gap, but he was just he could sprinkle in some of that European chain wrestling, but he could work very comfortably in the U.S. indie style that was emerging, and yeah, in quite a few significant matches in those first years. So, congrats to Doug Williams for having every one of his matches in Ring of Honor, other than one, reviewed on a podcast years after the fact. I don't know what I'm congratulating him for, man. I just did, but
for possibly winning the Matt F Trophy. No, I'm sorry, Doug, not this time. Maybe I'll go back and kind of retroactively award you the trophy for another show. I'm sure there were shows that he definitely would have wanted it for if I had invented the trophy by then, but I had not. I'm sorry.
You're gonna treat him like the Oscars, the Academy treated Alfred Hitchcock, where you're like it's gonna be like the second last episode of this podcast. You're gonna be like, well, Doug Williams really should have had one, so I'm gonna give him a lifetime achievement.
Yeah, he definitely does deserve a lifetime achievement Matt F Trophy.
So after the match, Colt gets a big chant. He raises Doug's arm. Doug clears the ring to give Colt his spotlight, his moment, as the crowd chants, "Thank you, Colt." Colt grabs the mic and says, "That was a hell of a win by Doug Williams. He was the better man tonight, no doubt about it." Colt asks the fans if they're enjoying the show, and he says, "Ring of Honor is an unreal product, isn't it?" And the crowd kind of gives him a tepid reaction to that. So he goes, "No?" And they give a better reaction. Kind of guilts them into it. Colt says, he started out with some guy, he forgets his name, CM something, it doesn't matter. And all they wanted to do was dominate the Midwest, be the best in that one area of the country, get better as pro wrestlers. But then ROH came along and they thought, it'd be cool if we could just get there as Midwest guys working the East Coast. That'd be cool. And then they did that. And now they get to see ROH go to Chicago, England, and pretty soon Japan. And that's not just due to the office, the wrestlers, or the guy working at Subway. That's us. That's the fans. Colt says he isn't moving up. He isn't moving down. He's just moving on. Colt gives this analogy that if you love Burger King and then try McDonald's and love it too, that's nothing against Burger King. They flame grill those Whoppers. They're unreal, at which point I wrote my notes in all caps, "Hey, Colt, I'll do the food-based analogies here." I was pretty pissed off at this point. But Colt says he knows the fans will follow him wherever he goes, and he appreciates their support, and that means the world to him. But Ring of Honor is still here, and it's still the greatest pure professional wrestling company in the world. Big reaction for that with a big ROH chant. And after it dies out, I love this. I don't know if you noticed this, man. After the big ROH chant at that moment dies out, you can hear one fan had been chanting Burger King. So,
I did not notice that. No, maybe that guy should get the Matt F Trophy. Jerry Lawler wasn't even there.
So one fan really took that analogy to heart. Was like, you know what, Ring of Honor is Burger King. I'm gonna really chant for that. But Colt thanks the fans. He thanks Kerry Silken, Gabe, Sid, and Ross. So going deep cuts with the office people, the whole office. He says. Colt calls ROH a mom and pop promotion. It's not a public promotion. It's not on the NASDAQ. Colt points out a fan in the crowd. He says that each time that fan buys a DVD and a hat, he's helping the promotion survive. Then he points out another presumably hefty fan. We can't see him. He's off camera. And Colt says every time that fan buys 15 hot dogs, that's helping the promotion survive. Colt thanks the fans. He asks us to keep supporting ROH, keep it going. Colt leaves.
By the way, the person he was pointing out was not hefty. He was Joey Chestnut. I'm joking, but I'm glad I popped Trevor.
Oh, that's good. I'm actually lightheaded. That was. I could just imagine. He does all those. He does all those hot dog eating contests in the name of ROH. People don't know that. So yeah, Colt gets another big thank you, Colt, and that's his speech. And look, I feel kind of bad for all of these guys in the shadow of Joe, because Joe got this big pre-announced farewell tour where he got to go to every major market ROH runs and got to cut, 6 different farewell speeches. And I think we both agree, other than maybe one of them, he did really well, Joe, on cutting like somewhat different, really good farewell speeches in every show. And now Colt has to do that just shows later. He doesn't get as pronounced and prolonged, doesn't get to meet every major market. He doesn't get to say goodbye to Philly or New York proper or anything like that. He does get to do New Jersey here. And, it was a good speech. And, I feel even worse.
They can't all be Samoa Joe, Trevor. What are you going to do?
But also, I feel like, in a way, Colt's lucky because at least he gets like a farewell tour. Daniels and Homicide aren't even going to get that.
Yeah, Homicide does get to do a promo in New York that wouldn't get to air on the pay-per-view. Although, does it air on the bonus DVD? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. We'll have to find out when we get to that. But yeah, and I think Seidel is another guy where when he leaves, it's on the DVD version of a pay-per-view taping. So
yeah, and listen. I mean, let's be real, right? Only Samoa Joe would be the one where you're like, yeah, I got to hear what that guy has to say, right? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like in terms of just charismatic promo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can't give huge farewells to everybody, especially when a bunch of them are happening in short order. So it is something that, Colt does get somewhat of a tour goodbye and gets to end it main eventing his home market. So they give him far from nothing. He has
a show, and he has a show like basically named after him. Yeah. He has a pretty good farewell as far as things go.
Yeah. It is now intermission, and we join interviewer Rebecca Bayless backstage with Chris Hero and Tank Tolan. Bayless asks them where Larry Sweeney was tonight. Chris says Larry is wheeling and dealing all over the world, trying to make better deals for them. Rebecca, crack interviewer, has the response to that of, and I quote, "Oh, okay, that's decent."
Yeah, what? Please explain this to me. What does that mean?
She is not. We've tried to be nice. She is not Gary Michael Capel.
No, okay, so listen. I think that our silence can speak volumes here.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say is the response led me to believe that she wasn't paying attention to what they said. Because if you're like someone's talking and you're not really actually paying attention, you're like, oh yeah, that's decent. You know what you just say something and it's not really congruent with whatever they said, but you just hope that they don't notice that what you said doesn't really reply to what they're saying.
Like, was she just expecting a different answer or something? Because she was like, deer, like, okay, yeah. Hero thinks they've proved tonight that they were a very formidable tag team, and if it wasn't for a little too much baby oil, they would have won tonight. Tank says that wasn't baby oil. That was hard, intense, all natural sweat. Tank says the problem is Hero needs to work on his grip strength. He produces some object and says Hero needs to squeeze it 500 times. Hero asks, isn't this just something you put at the end of bars at the weight room? And Tank, I will say, unconvincingly denies that. Hero asks, if I do this, you won't get pinned anymore, which I thought was a great line. At this point, Steen and Generico barge in. Steen is in a Rocky shirt. Generico's in an LWO shirt. Steen takes over the whole segment and says, the first time they teamed in ROH, they took the Briscoes to the limit. The second time, just now, they beat them. So he demands that everyone ask ROH officials to give the hottest ROH tag team a title shot. Steen leaves, but not before looking at Hero and asking Hero, what are you looking at? And then Hero's kind of meek after this. He just wonders, why does that guy deserve a title shot? He's brand new. And then Tank, meanwhile, he's just concerned. He just wants Hero to keep squeezing. So
this was this was a hoot. And I would even say Rebecca Bayless's head-scratching response makes it even better.
Yeah, it was just a lot of fun, a lot of big, fun personalities kind of colliding that you maybe don't expect, like a heel act and another basically, at this point, heel act collide. Because I don't think even like the Steen and Hero thing leads to anything, I don't think. It's just Steen being an asshole and he's going to like get in anyone's face right now. So that brings us to our first match back from intermission. Sarah Del Rey defeated Ernie Osiris via submission in a minute 39 when she made him tap out to the Royal Butterfly. So this was the main show debut for ROH student Ernie Osiris, although he had been in a few student dark matches dating back to 2006. I think this is the first time he ever makes a DVD doing a match.
He seems very nervous during his entrance. Like he's trying to seem like kind of sleazy, looking, but like his facial expressions, like he doesn't feel he can fully emote them. And
Yeah.
there must be a decent amount going on with him on this
Yeah,
show.
some people would say he looked pretty excited, Matt, to be there. But this is just a squash for Sarah Del Rey. As far as squashes go, I thought it was fine. I've seen better, but Del Rey doing the Vader bomb but landing a knee drop is cool. I love her big boot, and she does it again here. But she also took a move from Osiris and briefly sold. And to me, in a minute-long squash against a student that's literally never worked on a DVD before, just kill him. Like, that seems to be my advice on a few matches on these shows lately. Like, just kill the people. But there is something that we have to talk about, and I did not want to talk about. So I'll give people listeners a little peek behind the curtain.
By the way, I just want to tell you in advance, Trevor, I have nothing to say about any of this.
Okay. Well, I'll do it. I'll just give a little peek behind the curtain, which is after this match, sometime after Matt and I were talking on a instant messaging app, the way government officials need to do, and Matt brought up that there's this match on the show. Isn't that the one where people love to joke because Ernie Osiris has a visible erection? And maybe this says something about me, and maybe something I'm proud of, Matt. I went through the whole match and did not notice that. And you were like, "Well, we don't need to talk about that, right? Because it's kind of gauche for us." And I was like, "Yep." And then I immediately did the Trevor Dame thing, which is I started Googling, and apparently, like, I remembered this kind of vaguely, but not only is this the thing this match is known for, sadly for Ernie Osiris, this seems to be kind of what he's known for when you search him, like, as a pro wrestler. And look, we're watching, as we watch on these shows, sometimes the DVD rips aren't the best quality. He's wearing plain white tights. I went back and watched. It does appear he has an erection. Through the years, can't and will not ever be the boner police. They happen. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to muse why it did or didn't happen. I feel bad for him. Apparently, when I looked online, Matt, it comes up fairly frequently if you search Matt on Discords, on social media services, on Google for phrases which I sadly have now done for things such as Ernie Osiris erection or Ernie Osiris boner. You get hits, Matt. You get more than a couple hits. I'm
sure you do, Trevor.
There were people that I found that said they noticed it and were at the show, and they talked about it after the show. Matt, you were at the show. I imagine you did not notice.
From where I was sitting, I did not know a thing about it until I got home and went online. Yeah.
I was reminded, looking at the notes for future shows, that I believe at the Unbreakable pay-per-view taping that happens this year, there's a student match where Bobby Cruz apparently ring introduces Ernie Osiris as almost erect Ernie Cyrus. I found a Twitter thread where some Ring of Honor luminaries that love to banter on Twitter, like Pele Primo and Eric Stevens, were, let's say, playfully jabbing Ernie Osiris for getting erect during this match.
No pun intended. I don't know.
That was this match, and you know what? Judge it for yourself, folks. I don't know if this match is on Honor Club. If it is, that's bizarre. If it is, that's a prank on him. But we'll go to the Observer next quickly. Dave wrote about this match. They put Sarah Del Rey against a male trainee, Alex Osiris, which Dave, it's not Alex, it's Ernie. And Dave writes, Del Rey, whose offense comes across strong, pounded on him for 139 for a squash win. It's the first time they've ever done man against woman. And I corrected Brian before. I'll correct Dave here. That's not true, Matt. Matt, can you name the first intergender ROH match? I had to look it up. I did not remember.
Was it
like the first?
Was it something involving Alexis Lurie?
Correct. Happened in the first year.
But no, I do not remember who she wrestled.
Alexis Lurie took on Mace, and she beat him, one half of the Christopher Street Connection, at Scramble Madness.
So I was on the right track, at least.
Yeah. So they actually did go intergender in the very first. So someone clearly, because I don't think Dave would be a great ROH gatekeeper, like record keeper. Someone must have told him that it was the first intergender, but it actually isn't. So tisk tisk. an unforgivable sin, Matt, to not remember that. But the thing I didn't remember even, but until I looked it up. That brings us to Shingo defeated Matt Cross via pinfall in 11 minutes, 16 seconds with the Last of the Dragon. Matt, I did not notice if either guy had an erection in this match, but
you did. No, just kidding.
What did you think about? Did this match give you an erection? I'll turn the tables on you, my friend.
Well, depends. Was it a full erection? No. There were some cool looking moves in this match. And I think that's one of the things you want from these guys. I'd say my complaint about the match is that for part of the match there was a kind of a slow section early on, and I don't really know if that's what you want for a match of this length between these two guys. Like it starts out fast. They get onto the apron and Cross cartwheels on it to avoid Shingo, and then he leaps off the apron to run a Shingo, but Shingo catches him in a powerbomb position and whips him into the guardrail, which was cool. Then Cross, he does that flagpole on the ring post. He didn't do that in this match, but he sort of does a mini one on the apron, and he suckers Shingo into grabbing him, which allows him to do another Rana on the floor. And then at a certain point, Shingo catches Cross coming off the ropes, drapes him over the top rope, drives him down into his knee, and then takes over. And then it gets into that methodical section, and I'm like, I mean, I hope the match builds, because this is a bit slow for what you'd want right here. But once they get going again, near the final sequence, I would say it gets pretty good. There's a spot where Shingo shakes off some Matt Cross style chops, hits a gutbuster and a DDT, and goes right into a senton. Cross hits a Rana and an Enziguri, and a very slow spinning DDT. I don't know if you noticed that. There's a spot where Shingo rolls to the floor and Cross does his dive fake out and then does the actual flip dive. And then back on the way in, Cross hits a springboard double stomp off the top rope to Shingo's back, an immediate nice standing moonsault. Cross gets a triangle choke on Shingo, but Shingo powerbombs his way out of it. And then Cross reverses a powerbomb attempt into a really cool snap Rana. Gets a near fall off of that. There's an unfortunate spot where Cross hits a twisting press that really looks like it missed, but they both kind of follow up as though he'd hit it. So that's not great, but then he goes for a shooting star press, and Shingo moves, and Cross lands on his feet, hits an inverted atomic drop, hits the gut wrench spinning power bomb, huge lariat. Cross gets one quick comeback with a crucifix bomb, and then Shingo hits the last falconry and gets the win. I thought that if it was just the final sequence, it would have been better. If it was a whole match that was sort of that pace. I just thought the match was too short to really need this methodical section in the middle. That one botch by Cross took it down a bit. But in the end, I would still put it at a 3.25 star range, just because I thought there was a lot of cool stuff and it got exciting. I just think it could have been a 3.5 star match if they had been, I don't know, if they had paced it out a little bit better. If it didn't have the botch, I think it could have gotten a little bit higher. But as it was, I enjoyed it for what it was. I'd probably go 3 stars, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I might have liked this match maybe just a hair less than you, but I feel largely the same. First thing I want to say is early on commentary, they say Shingo wants to start racking up wins so he can challenge for the ROH World title. And they're clearly talking in a way to build up the upcoming match with Morishima for the title that Shingo's going to have. But here, the funny thing is that happens 2 shows from now. So the monumental amount of wins Shingo racks up after he loses to Jack Evans the night before the show that earns him the title shot is 2. 1 over Matt Cross here, and then he beats BJ Whitmer on the next show. So he's got to start racking up wins. Apparently that's all you need. But this was a decent little mid-card action match, but I felt like something was missing, and I think maybe you found it with the pacing part. I also kind of thought maybe it's something with Matt Cross. He's an amazing natural athlete. He has usually excellent body control. He's a guy at this point who has at least a couple moves like the flagpole, splash, which he does not do in this match, but like no one else in wrestling was even attempting. But in matches like this, I feel like there's just a bit of personality. There's a bit of spark that's missing. Like the way I would put it is his moves grab your attention, but he as a whole doesn't really grab your attention. As a match, again, another match, no real story, back and forth, mid-tempo. Crowd isn't very loud for it, but they do pop for the biggest moves. It's a mid-card match. There is some impressive stuff. I thought Shingo hit one of the better lariats we've seen in Ring of Honor, aided by an amazing cross bump for it. I liked Shingo doing like a vertical suplex, and Cross goes for a small package, but Shingo holds him without Cross being able to like take him over and then herks him back up again. I thought that was cool. Some real cool displays of power between Shingo and Claudio on this show. And going to what you said, Matt, even though I just said how great Cross's body control is, and it usually is, on his two biggest I thought on two dives in this match, there's that one to the floor and then one in the ring. I thought on both of them, he overshot Shingo each time to where he barely made contact with him. And I was like, for a guy that's usually like, that's his biggest strength, maybe, it was like, that's not a great thing when you're kind of missing on that. Overall, I felt like this had enough action and neat spots to be a little bit above average. I'd probably give it like 2 3/4 stars, and I'm a person that 2.5 stars is not like a dirty, evil rating for me. I think that's average match, so it's slightly above average.
So the verdict: no erection.
No, there wasn't even a stirring, Matt. No, maybe at a couple of points there would have been a slight stirring. If we're doing an erection based, there was nothing close to. Should we do the 5-star match rating review cycle, but like 5 stars, full lift off?
Nope. Nope. But thank you for asking. I appreciate
Matt. Most of my sex life has been negative stars. I think one thing I thought after I was watching.
Wait, what does this have to do? What does this have to do with sex? I thought we were talking about erections.
I can stay on that, Matt. If you want to play chicken, I can stay on this topic. But
no.
We can go back to Ernie Osiris.
Nope.
So I will say one thing is, I think looking back at the many reasons why faction warfare didn't take off, the resilience is losing a fair bit right out of the gate. We talked about that, I think, on the last show. But if you look at Matt Cross here, he already missed some shows right after, he joined the Brazilians. He missed a couple shows. And then after this loss, I looked it up, he only works one of the next 4 ROH shows. And in 2 shows, Austin Aries gets pulled temporarily from the company by TNA. So just really bad, I guess, luck. I don't know how much of Matt Cross's bookings were known before they had him join the No Remorse Corps, but like, when we talk about like reasons this deal didn't get off the ground, I think maybe people look at like the overall meta of the name and the composition stuff, but something like that can't help, right? Like where Stevens is in a separate match with Jay Briscoe. Cross is losing to Shingo right when Shingo's on his way out, and then Cross is going to largely disappear for a couple weekends. Like it's just not the way to get a stable off to the right.
And also, like no promos. that doesn't help either. Yeah.
So that brings us to a stable that I do think is clicking a bit more. That is the No Remorse. In our semi-main event, the No Remorse Corps of Davey Richards and Roderick Strong defeated Delirious and Jack Evans in 17 minutes, 30 seconds when Richards pinned Delirious after hitting a DR driver. So I thought the Briscoes and Steenerico match on this show, I probably liked a bit less than people, including you and some of the people I saw online when I looked up after I kind of wrote my own review in my notes. This might be a match I wouldn't be shocked if I like this more than everybody else, because this match felt like the answer to so many criticisms I've had lately, including ones on this episode. It feels like it was a match like structured for me. So, for example, like on the last episode, I talked about Jack Evans wrestled Shingo, and I was disappointed that we didn't get a big Shingo beatdown of Jack, because I thought that would have been really cool. Well, we get a big beatdown of Jack Evans here. I complained on this episode and the previous one about tag matches where I was like, well, the wrestlers just didn't beat enough ass. Ass gets beaten here, Matt. ass gets really beaten down here. I keep that for a soundbite. I complained about
someone can. That's for sure.
I complained about the structure of tag matches on the last 2 shows. Like, to me, this match was structured perfectly for my taste. It had everything I wanted in it, in the right amounts, happening at the right times. It tells a simple, classic wrestling story. It all makes sense. So Jack and Delirious run to the ring for their entrance. They don't wait for the bell because they're feuding with these heels. They hate them. So kind of like, again, I talked about earlier, I love when you carry the emotion that you should be having into a feud. You don't just start it with a lockup. We get a super hot opening where Jack does a double stop from over the top rope onto the floor. He does a moonsault off the barricade. Delirious does this huge flip dive from the top turnbuckle to the floor. Big hot start. And then the match quickly settles down in the ring. And we get that long beatdown of Jack. And it's really good. Like, Roddy and Davey have very quickly settled in as heels. The crowd, like, they love to chant against Roderick in a way I think they only previously loved chanting against Jimmy Rave. Like, they love to do the Roderick. They love that. Davey continues to be a pretty funny as the ass-showing, annoying jock heel. He'll shout, "I'm winning," which I know you love when he's winning. But then he'll have moments like later in this match where he sells that he's out on his feet, and he just meekly also says, "I'm winning."
Did you notice the spot where he was doing kicks and he yells, "My kicks rule"?
Yeah, I was just about to say, and that's why it's so funny. He's doing a running boot, and as he's hitting, he screams, "My kicks rule!" And it's so ridiculous. The crowd breaks into laughter. Like, it's so funny that he's just so douchey in a great way. And he and Roddy now both tease the crowd, like denying them things. Davey in this match, he goes for a standard kick combo that he does in a lot of his matches. And before the big final kick, he tells the crowd they don't deserve it. And he just poses on top of Jack's corpse instead. And then later, Roddy does this great thing where he's holding Jack up in a long delayed vertical suplex. And then he tells the ref, "Go look at Delirious in the corner." And instead of hitting the suplex, he puts Jack gently back on his feet and just punches him in the nuts, which again, it's like you're doing probably less damage. You're just being an asshole. And I thought they did they're really gelling as a heel act. And you got the great Jack bumps you'd want from like a Jack Evans in peril section too. On the apron, Jack goes for something he occasionally does, which he kind of like Matt Cross. He does the cartwheel to avoid a move. But this time, he's avoiding Roddy by doing the cartwheel on the apron. And as he's upside down on the apron, mid-cartwheel, Richards comes with a running kick through the ropes, hits Jack with it, and Jack just splats on the floor the way that very few people can splat on a floor like Jack Evans can. Roddy later, he cradles Jack like a baby, and he just fucking chucks him into the turnbuckles like a bag of garbage, which again, I love shit like that. It's probably not fun for Jack Evans. I love that stuff. And then we get Richards puts Jack in a gory special, and Roddy chops him in the chest while he's in the gory special. Like, there's so many, it's so great. And then we get Jack finally making the hot tag. Delirious is a big old House of Fire sequence where he kicks Strong and Richard's asses 1-on-2. But what I love is it follows the classic logic I want from a segment like that, where Delirious runs wild for a while because he's the fresh man. But eventually, because it is 1-on-2 and Jack still hasn't immediately recovered from this beatdown, he's still selling it. Naturally, the heels survive, and eventually the numbers take over and they take over the match again. But then Jack, after enough time, does eventually recover, and we get your usual final few minutes. Everyone does shit, going wild, and it all ends with maybe one of the loudest chair shots I've ever heard, where Delirious has Davey in an O'Connor roll. Davey kicks out, and like often with an O'Connor roll, that kind of launches you into the ropes, and it launches Delirious into the ropes, and Roddy from the floor is waiting with the chair, and he just fucking El Kabongs Delirious in the head with his chair that is so loud that the crowd groans. And
another spot where it's like, this guy just had a concussion a couple months ago, but whatever. It's hindsight.
Yeah, I was about to say, I assume Delirious was fine because I don't think he missed time for this, but like you, I had that same thought, which is like, of all the guys to take a chair shot like this, like, yeah, another guy who just returned from a very serious concussion. And then Davey hits the DR driver for the win. And even there, I love the finish because there's this extra moment I love where Jack is trying to jump through the ropes to break up the pin. And as the ref counts 3, Jack makes like this stumbling leap through the ropes, and he's not anywhere close. But I love that, like usually the guy either breaks up the pin or they're a mile away. I love that Jack was like clearly one step behind. Like it sold the struggle and how beat down Jack had been during the match, where like he's almost there, but he just doesn't quite have enough. this to me is an exciting match with a bunch of cool stuff. I could see some people with 2025 eyes wanting even more big moves, even more big near falls. Maybe they wouldn't appreciate the somewhat slower heel beat down in the middle. But to me, this isn't a match of the year contender. I think it's a great match. To me, this is a 4-star hidden gem. This match is like comfort food to me. Everyone acts how I want them to act. It's got every ingredient I want from these 4 guys in this match in the right proportions. I've had a lot of complaints about the structure of recent tag matches. I have 0 complaints with this one. So again, this might be one of those matches I like more than other people. I don't think anyone would hate this match. I just really like the structure of it.
I was worried at the beginning of this match because a lot of times in ROH, they have matches where people they charge the ring, there's a big brawl at the beginning, and it's really exciting, and then they settle down and it gets boring. And I was worried that's what was going to happen here, but it didn't. It did settle down, but it settled down into this really hot heel beatdown on Jack Evans. And really everything that Evans and Roderick Strong do with each other is gold, whether they're teaming together, whether they're opponents. So the best parts of this match were absolutely the parts where Strong was beating down Jack and, some of Jack's comebacks. But Richards' heat on Evans was good too. For a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. And Strong and Richards do such a good job as a heel duo at this point that it was pretty seamless. And really, it was almost like Delirious was an afterthought in this match a little bit. He played his part, but he was, considering how much they built up Delirious as the guy Roderick Strong was most scared of, I would say that didn't totally come across in this match, if that makes sense. It was really about the No Remorse core and Evans. But disregarding that, I still agree with you. This was so much fun to watch, and it was really all about, I think Jack was the star of the match, just all the selling. His comeback was great too, but the selling was just fantastic, and the heels were totally game to dish out the offense that was needed to emphasize all the best stuff that Jack can do. So, you basically listed the actual highlights. I don't think I have to go over any of them again, but I thought it told a really good story. I thought Evans was just so perfect in the role. It's very rare to have a match like this in ROH at this point in the show, where it wasn't fast paced, but it was totally exciting the entire time. And I would say this was that. That heel beatdown in the middle was still exciting, even in between the hot secrets at the beginning and the end. So I agree with you about this. This was a great match.
And I think you made a great point about Jack being the star of this match and that middle part, because I think, maybe one of the powers Jack has is he can make a beatdown more compelling than a lot of wrestlers can. Just the things you can do about him, the way he takes a beating, the sympathy you can get from him. And I will give credit to, I think, Roddy and Davey did a really good job for some of the things I said, during that too. But I think, like you said, how they were able to keep the crowd engaged in a slower kind of section of the match. Yeah, I think that a lot of that is to Jack. And again, when we look back at Faction Warfare Not Taking Off, I want to point this out too. It's interesting to see at this early stage, the first faction, the No Remorse Corps, in my mind up to this point, I'll be interested in what you say. I think they're actually working. Roddy and Davey are over in this act as a team. They're really, I think, pretty good as heels. The problem is it's not them. It's the Resilience is not a cohesive stable. It's not getting a strong launch. And Jack still doesn't even have the inkling of a stable at this point, which is weird. During this match, commentary says Jack still has an intention to form a faction, but he doesn't have any members or even a name. And then they're like, will Delirious be a member? We'll see. Spoiler, guys. He's not a member, and I don't know if they're holding off on this because they know Jack's going to have to leave for Dragon Gate again soon for 2 or 3 months. But it's another example of, I think, one of the things that kind of hampered this whole storyline is we just talked about the Resilience problems. Well, Jack's fighting a faction warfare storyline where it's going to be months and months still before he even has a stable. It's just really weirdly scheduled. Put together? I don't know.
Jack should have just never said he was going to do a stable, right? Then it wouldn't have seemed weird. It would have been fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You could have done a story where Jack's like, I don't need another stable. I just got burned by my friends breaking up on this one. I'm going to fight on my own. And then have him, go get beat down right before he has to go to Dragon Gate for 3 months. And then have him come back and go, you know what? I do need a stable. But instead, yeah, like right from basically like a few shows ago, he was openly saying, maybe I need to form a group too. And now it just leaves this lingering question show after show. Well, what's taking you so long? Like, are you just slacking?
But
Like,
I
why
agree,
haven't you found anybody?
but I agree. The NRC has been good. I mean, Romero hasn't really found his voice, so to speak, yet. But Richards and Strong are great together.
Yeah, if they had two other stables of that kind of cohesion and quality, maybe people look back on this era differently, but there's going to be so many problems with, having everyone there at the same time and maybe how the other groups kind of gel. It's just, yeah, but it is interesting kind of a snapshot on this one night, when you watch these guys wrestle, it's like, well, you got something here. Also, I'll just mention, I don't know if anyone cares, Jack Evans came to the ring in a Shaquille O'Neal Miami Heat jersey. So for anyone that cares, that's what he wore to the ring. We then return backstage where Rebecca Bayless is joined by Daisy Hayes. Daisy says Sarah Del Rey's win tonight was impressive, but she beat her last night. Sarah called it a fluke. Daisy calls it fate. She says with Sarah wanting a rematch, name the time and place, she'll be there. And so, yeah, for some reason on this weekend, the match that gets the most promo build-up in backstage segments is Sarah Del Rey, Daisy Hayes, which, I'll take it. That brings us to the main event. The ROH World Title match. Takeshi Morishima successfully defends the ROH World Title when he defeated Nigel McGuinness via pinfall in 17 minutes, 8 seconds after a backdrop driver. Well, I think he hit it 3 in this match. Matt, these guys will wrestle each other a couple more times in singles this year. They wrestled each other in a tag match just the night before. This is the first singles match these guys have with each other. What'd you think?
I was trying to remember if anyone believed that Nigel would win the match here. Like, in some ways it makes sense. On the other hand, I don't think that I did because I thought just they made too big a deal about Morishima coming out and he was booked on future shows. And I figured they were going to give him more of a run instead of having him lose the belt on his second ROH show title defense. You know what I mean? So I think that affected the match, the expectations, because there was some hot stuff at the beginning, and then there's a big sequence in the middle where they're doing some good stuff. Nigel's targeting the arm after Morishima clotheslines the post. There's a spot where Nigel does a sunset flip powerbomb all the way over the top rope, but Morishima drops down, crushing his chest. There's a spot where Morishima kind of just picks up Nigel on the apron and drops him face first on the floor. But during all of this stuff, the crowd's not really reacting. It's a quiet crowd, and I was just wondering, is it just because they do not buy that Morishima could lose the belt at this point? But then, even after a Tower of London, there's no real reaction to the near fall. But then there's a spot where Nigel catches Morishima when he goes up top, and he hits a superplex. But Morishima immediately pops back up and then hits a big boot, which Nigel counters with a lariat, and both guys are down. And for some reason at that moment, it's like a switch is flipped, and the crowd gets really into the match. And we get, I guess at that point, more of our final sequence in the match. And this is where I think the show gets its name. They really lean into this fighting spirit thing of guys popping up after big moves, hitting another big move. And I guess the idea is just to show the resilience of Morishima, but especially of Nigel. Since Nigel's going to lose here, they just do a lot of repeated moves. Nigel repeatedly super kicks Morishima, and Morishima keeps screaming and then eventually hits a big lariat. And then Nigel kicks out of a backdrop driver. And then Nigel pops up after a missile drop kick and hits what Prazak calls a fighting spirit lariat. Gets a near fall off that. They trade forearms in the center. Morishima hits a hip attack, and Nigel goes right into the jawbreaker lariat, and the crowd pops really big at Morishima's kick out. Then Nigel goes for another jawbreaker, but Morishima hits a boot, hits a clothesline to the back, and then another big lariat, gets a near fall. Then Morishima hits a backdrop driver, and Nigel again, fighting spirit. He pops up, goes for another lariat, but Morishima blocks it and hits the third backdrop driver and gets the win. So, all those like big pop-up sequences, the crowd definitely likes them. But it definitely took them a while to get into the match. When they did get into it, they were really hot for that finishing sequence I just described. Um, the rest of the match, like it's not a ton of selling or build. There's that arm work that Nigel does that doesn't really play into anything in the final stretch. Um, so I thought there was a lot of excitement here. Whether you thought it was a great match, I think probably depends on your tolerance for all that. I'm popping up after a really big move and hitting my own move stuff. Um, which honestly, that kind of stuff is pretty popular in with some wrestlers now. We are recording this right after the big match on Dynamite with Takeshita and Will Ospreay in April of 2025, if you're listening to this anytime in the future. And that match had a number of spots like that too, where people popped up and hit another big move. So it's kind of it kind of is in my framework of reference. Watching this 18 years later, it's still something I get, and I enjoyed it. But I could see how it was just too much for some people. Whereas maybe a more grounded storyline that was more emotional might have affected people a little bit better. But I think the story here, as they told it, was pretty effective. I would put this match on the border of very good and great. I think they could definitely do better, but I think that what they did here worked.
I agree on pretty much everything. This is what I expected. It's a rarity for ROH, the big boys bomb throwing heavyweight match. Because Ring of Honor was the land of the smaller, undersized, underappreciated by the major leagues guys. We don't get a lot of two guys this big having a big main event. And they do throw bombs. Morishima does all his signature stuff. They work hard. Nigel's mouth and Morishima's nose are bleeding by the end of the match, so they're clearly really throwing leather here. And Nigel's pulling out some big main event stuff, like he does hit a diving body block from the top turnbuckle to the floor. Like he doesn't do that all the time. That's something he's pulling out if it's a big night. Or there's that move where he has Morishima laying on the apron and Nigel jumps over the top rope and comes down on him as he falls to the floor. But I said this match is what I expected. I would also say there aren't a lot of surprises in this match either, which isn't entirely a bad thing. Sometimes, like, a match is exactly what you expected, and that's a great thing. And sometimes, for some reason, there are matches that you're hoping to get a little something that you don't expect too. And for some reason, for me, I had a little bit of that. There are a couple things here. Fairly early on, Morishima goes to lariat Nigel on the floor against a ring post, and when Nigel dodges, Morishima hurts his arm, and Nigel spends the next minute or two working it over. But as soon as he's done that sequence, it's done. Nigel never goes back to it. Morishima never sells it again. And I don't mind that, because if you only work a body part over for a short period of time, to me, it doesn't have to then be sold for the rest of the match. It doesn't have to become the story of the entire night. But it was just this weird, notable pit stop where for like the first time in Morishima's ROH run, I was like, oh, someone's really going after Morishima's arm. This is like different. And then it almost immediately, they're just like, well, that was just something we did to do. This match also has a bunch of no selling, like you said. I think the story, like you said, is the no selling, leading Prazak on commentary to literally say Fighting Spirit, the name of the show. And I know some people are no selling absolutists. They never want to see it. Some people love it. I'm a person who thinks there's a place for it in fairly limited usage at the right times. But with Morishima, I actually think he should do more of it than he does in ROH, because that's one of the things that makes him stand out in ROH, that differentiates him, is that they've never had the monster heavyweight that shakes stuff off in a big way. Like, even Samoa Joe did not play his role like that. And in this match, where the crowd is not out of it, but like you said, there are times where the heat isn't there, certainly not the heat you would want for a big world title main event. Some of those no-sell spots you talked about are like some of the most over moments of the match, like in particular that one where you mentioned where Morishima pops her up right after the superplex and hits Nigel with the big boot, and then Nigel no-sells that and hits a lariat, or the million super kicks moment where, maybe Nigel and Morishima were the original Young Bucks, because there was a lot of super kicks no-sold here. But
I've always thought that about them. They were the original Young Bucks.
But I think, like, some people, like some snarky people might go, oh, well, there's always been no selling in ROH. But I don't mean like no selling in that you're working such a fast-paced match that no one is stopping to sell the moves because they have to get to the next move because they're going at such a fast pace. I mean the traditional old school no sell where you are purposely making a point to take a move and show everyone that it didn't hurt you, or at least that you're trying to show everyone that it didn't hurt you. And I think, I don't like a lot of that in my wrestling, but I think if you want to make Morishima seem special and unique, pushing him as the guy who like a lot of stuff just won't work on him. I think that's where he that would have been that's kind of his lane, I think, to have gotten more over here. But I will say Morishima is a little sassier here, maybe because the crowd is very pro Nigel. Morishima sticks his tongue out at them. At one point, he cups his ear like Hogan to taunt them while they're booing him or something. And Matt, people say Noah never found a successor to Misawa, but they absolutely did with Morishima in terms of a guy who frequently is adjusting his trunks during the match. So they found that successor. I have something I don't, and Dave will talk about this in a note after the match, but I need you to solve this for me, Matt, because I think you kind of touched on it maybe a bit, but like Morishima, to me, we're not, still far from over on his reign, on his run Ring of Honor, but Morishima, to me, so far, we've seen him work a little bit in ROH, and he continues to me to be a special talent in that terms of there's not many people that can combine that size and that agility in one package. He does have, I think, some charisma. He can really project menace at times, not always, but at times. He works hard, and yet even here in this match, which is an enjoyable match, my rating is very similar to yours. I would call this a very good match, 3 3/4 stars, so basically your exact rating. But a few people even do chant from a couple times during this match. It still feels like something still isn't quite clicking all the way with the audience. Like you can feel it. There's something that isn't clicking, and I can't quite. I feel it too, and I can't quite identify it. But overall, I will say, very good match. They went big. It took 3 backdrop drivers to beat Nigel, so I do think they're trying to protect him a bit in a loss. And I do think they left themselves just enough room where you don't walk away going, how are they going to top that in terms of like the spots? Like I think they could have done just a little bit more, even bigger spots. So I do feel like they made this match feel like they did a lot, but they could probably go a little bit bigger even, and makes sense since they're going to have multiple rematches. But do you have any thoughts on like anything I said, but especially like, do you agree like there's just something that's not quite there with Morishima so far?
Honestly, no, I don't agree. Like, I think he's just new. Like, and his stuff is getting over. Like, I think it's just the audience is just learning his beats, his style, his pace. I think he's really only had one really, really good match in ROH so far. It was the one with Joe. I'm not sure how long that had been out on DVD by the time this show was out. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are just getting used to him. That's all. I think this would have been the case with almost anybody, except for maybe somebody with like such a dynamic, slick American indie style, which this guy did not have. It was more of like a rough around the edges bruiser style. And I think that just takes some time for people to kind of figure out what to expect and how to react. So no, I actually don't think that. I think that once you'll see, like, over the course of the next few shows, he has a great match with Shingo. The Aries match is good. The main event of Respect is Earned is really good. I think people just are starting to get used to him. By the time we get to the summer, he's having a number of really memorably good matches. Including what, won the Observer Match of the Year and all that stuff. So I think it's just give it a minute. That's all I would say. Give it a minute. I think Morishima gets there. That's all I can say.
You just said give it a minute a couple times. Are we going back to talking about my boners again?
Trevor, don't get in my head. No pun intended. Are we going to take a time machine to help you with your boners?
Boner time machine. But no,
I'm putting that prompt in ChatGPT right now. Full length. I'm asking for a 2.5 hour movie, 2.5 hour treatment for Boner Time Machine, starring Trevor Dame.
Oh God, I do think you make some good points about Morishima there. Maybe I'm just Although there is something I'm feeling, but maybe that will be magically fade away as we rewatch these other matches, which because I do remember a lot of these matches being really good, like you said. I guess one other thing to say about Morishima is he does have a problem. I guess it's not as big a problem for him, but similar to the problems we just talked about with the faction warfare stables, where Morishima wins the ROH World Title. And then he has a follow-up double shot week where he works BJ Whitmer and a tag match, and then he misses 4 of ROH's biggest shows of the year.
Yeah, I mean, like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, doesn't it seem logical that he wouldn't be completely fully like the crowd wouldn't be completely fully invested in him yet?
Yeah, I bring that up to kind of support your point, which is like he had this weird kind of opening where he gets a big push right off the start, and then they kind of the 2 follow-up matches to him winning the title aren't necessarily like the sexiest matches, and then he's gone for major shows. So, like, to your point, yeah, that itself is a hill he has to climb. That isn't his fault. So we'll go to the Observer now. Dave wrote about this match. Morishima ended up with a broken nose, while McGuinness had a bloody lip. Almost all reports indicate people haven't taken to Morishima. The Japanese guys who get over in ROH are from the high-flying small guys or the heavyweights who have the legend aura from the golden era. The crowd got into the match, particularly McGuinness's near falls, as they did want him to take the title. Part of the problem is Bryan Danielson set a certain standard as champion, and the guys who have followed him haven't been able to be the full package of promos, behavior, and the working. Again, Dave wrote promos, behavior, and the working.
But so a weird verbiage aside, I remember even reading it at the time, and I'm like, geez, like give it a second, like that. Like this was only his 3rd ROH title defense, his 2nd ROH title defense on a show, and his 1st ROH title defense against a challenger anyone took even half seriously. So, like, of course, he's not going to live up to the Bryan Danielson standard at that point. Bryan Danielson wouldn't have lived. I mean, go back to Bryan Danielson's 2nd title defense. It was against Steve Corino. His 3rd title defense was against Roderick, which was great. But then he have a match against Chris Sabin. People didn't take that match so seriously. Like, you got to give it a second. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. People are very hasty.
Until that first Roddy match, he does not really find himself as the champion. Like
exactly.
Yeah, and you know, I think we reviewed the early Sabin and Korea title defenses were like decently good, but like as far as Bryan Danielson ROH singles matches, they're probably some of the least impressive matches you'll find from him in the last few years. So yeah, he had a slow start too. So that's a great point too, that Danielson didn't even, you know, some people don't hit the ground absolutely running. And so Dave finishes let me just pick up where I left off. Promos, behavior, and the working. McGuinness did a plancha as well as the Tower of London on the floor. Still, it was about a 3 3/4 star match, which again, so all of us agree. Dave's live sources, you and me, we all independently agree on that exact rating. Dave continues, Gabe Sapolsky always points out that it took Joe a few months as champion before he started getting over, and feels in 2 to 3 months, Morishima will be over, and his matches both nights were strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how it works. Especially with someone who's brand new. Like, I feel like it's I don't even understand why it's even a discussion. Like, it just seems so obvious to me. But anyway, maybe I'm weird. I am weird, but you know, for that reason, and additionally to all the other ones.
And Gabe famously had a theory. I forget the exact specifications of it, but and it's probably more outdated now in the days of like being able to instantly stream most wrestling shows live. But back in like the days of this era where you ran shows and then other than the live crowd, everyone had to wait weeks or months to watch them on DVD. Gabe's feeling was always, I think it was something like 9 months to a year or something in that range. It took pushing a new guy before you could see the results of them getting over with the live crowds, because his idea was it took that long to have enough of a body of work filter out to like the entire audience and to kind of build a reputation and a name among the live crowd. So yeah, if we're going by that too, Morishima hasn't hit that mark yet. I also have to mention, I forgot to mention, I love that Morishima face first choke slam he does. I don't know why more people don't do a face first choke slam. It's a really cool spot. He does it from the apron to the floor. And Matt, we also have to talk about, this might have been the first show for. I'm not sure. Maybe he had the last show. I don't know. This is Morishima is in his ROH merchandise shirt, which for all those of you that won't watch the matches and you haven't seen it, it's a black and white T-shirt with a picture of Morishima hitting a backdrop driver, and it just has the words backdrop on it. Not backdrop driver, just backdrop. And I can't decide if it's the best or worst ROH shirt they've ever produced. I don't know if I love it.
I think it's great, personally.
Yeah. But
yeah. And also it's just funny because like the first time he was in, like, for that last run, he was wearing like fur and like a cowboy hat. Now he's just like, yep, just a T-shirt. It says backdrop. Like that's the most simplifying of an outfit in like just like a short period of time that I've ever seen.
Like just him thinking, I'm not carrying this shit through customs anymore. Can you imagine if you're like a 6'6" giant, 300+ pound Japanese man coming through like the airport, and you're like, yeah, here's my cowboy hat and fur coat. Like, what? Like,
but if he said I'm a pro wrestler, they would have been like, oh, okay, got it. Although, with like, anytime you mention like to anybody who doesn't watch wrestling that you want to see like wrestling in Japan or something, like I've talked about, like I want to take a trip to Japan and go to see New Japan Wrestling. You know what they always think, right? That you're going to try
sumo, right?
Sumo, yeah. So they might have thought that too.
So after the match, Morishima goes to leave, but he gets back in the ring. Nigel sells being beat to shit, but eventually he struggles up to his feet, and Morishima shakes his hand. It's a handshake that Nigel actually won before the start of the match, but at that time, Morishima angrily slapped again. So they're trying to give Nigel these little things here, right? Like, hey, okay, he lost to Morishima, but took 3 backdrop drivers, and at least Nigel earned Morishima's respect tonight. He didn't want to give him a handshake at first. Now he makes a point. He's going to shake Nigel's hand. The camera then follows Morishima through the curtain backstage, and I think Morishima maybe collapses or at least sits down, but it's so dark you can't tell, yet they left that shot in. It's that great crack ROH production. I don't know what he did. They clearly wanted to show us him doing something. I don't know if he collapsed, sat down, got a cracker. I don't know.
But it was so like, I don't even know what the word is. It was a terrible idea. Why would you do that? To show somebody just walk into darkness for like 30 seconds to show nothing. It doesn't make any sense. Like, where is the quality control there? I know it's a very small thing, but like, it drove me nuts. Like, why would anyone think this was something to leave in?
Yeah, like especially if your idea was we want to show again to put over Nigel, let's say it was Morishima collapsing backstage immediately after he goes through the curtain. Hey, that's a good idea, but you didn't have the lighting for it. And to me, yeah, going to your point, how do you, when you're editing the show, not see that and go, well, this is unusable. Like, it was a nice idea, but we have to cut this. Right.
And you lose almost nothing from cutting it. And you gain not having 30 seconds of just weird darkness.
Yeah. And it's that kind of stuff that's weird because, ROH has improved their production over their history, but they still make choices like that they made literally in year one, where it's like, well, this is in complete darkness, but we shot it, so it's going to be on the DVD.
Again, I think they just decided, well, we don't have music videos that give away the finishes at the beginning anymore, so it's a win for us. So we're winning.
Finally, we then return backstage to the No Remorse Corps, who are celebrating and recapping their wins this weekend. They forget the name of Aries' new group, and they think it might be called the Brazilians.
I have to say, I thought that was very funny.
Yeah, that was a good line.
A very good line, yeah.
They talk about Rocky's win over Claudio, and when they're talking about Davey says, Swiss people can't wrestle. We know that. And I thought that's like such highly specific bigotry. It was like I realized he's a heel, but it's like we all know Swiss people can't wrestle. I was like, what? Do we know that? I don't know that. It's like you might as well have said we all know Danish people can't play the pan flute. That would have made the same amount of sense to me. But
it's such a silly bit. It's just a silly line that no one could actually be offended by it. That's I think what makes it work.
So Roderick says, hey, let's have some more fun, though. And they walk out into the empty building where it's after the show. The fans are all gone, but the students are taking down the ring. And they proceed to beat the shit out of poor Sugarfoot, Alex Payne, one of the ROH students. 3-on-1. Davey says, we could be next. And then they walk away laughing. So No Remorse Corps having a good old night. And that's how we end the show.
That finish was very Carnage Crew.
Yeah, I was gonna say that felt very first year ROH too, like the idea of we're gonna end the show with one of these tough groups, they're just gonna beat up some students out in the empty building. Like that's literally something like you were saying. I couldn't remember the stable. Yeah, like that's literally like lifting the Carnage Crew.
I miss the Carnage Crew now that I saw that.
Yeah.
But yes.
Matt, you know what would have saved Faction Warfare? The Carnage Crew. You got to reunite the new and improved and the original. That's the ultimate faction.
So Danny Daniels, Masada, Loke, and DeVito? No Justin Credible. Sorry, Trevor.
They're shitting in everyone's bags, Matt. they can't be stopped.
They shit in their own bags.
That would be great. A segment where like the North Core like we're gonna get revenge, and they open the Carnage Crew's bags and there's already shit in them. And they're like, what? They're like, yeah, I'm just like a kid that's been bullied. I make fun of my weight before you can. I shit my own bag.
There you go.
That would have been great. Anyway, Matt, we've talked about boners, we've talked about shitting in bags, but one thing we haven't talked about is who wins the Matt F Trophy.
Well, I got to get in my boner time machine and go back to before I watched the show, because I'd be surprised to tell myself that actually, even though I didn't remember that this was such a good match, I'm actually going to give the Matt F Trophy to Jack Evans on this show, because I thought that might have been the best match on the show, surprisingly to me. And I thought he was the standout performer in it, with all the great selling, some great flying moves. I think this was a extremely underrated night for Jack Evans. So he is the winner of the Matt F Trophy.
Yeah, and you could tell from my review, I completely 100% agree. And it's great after like probably one of the more disappointing Jack Evans matches we've seen in Ring of Honor, in that Shingo match, which was really felt like could have been good, and it was just kind of there. It wasn't terrible. It was just kind of there. Now the very next night, it's like you said, I agree, like one of the more underrated Jack Evans performances, because people don't remember this match, and it's really good. So, very appropriate. So that's the show.
Yeah, well, I will see. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go on. I want your point.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of underrated, I think this show is generally underrated. I thought this was a very good show. I mean, I think there were matches that you liked more than me. There were matches that I liked more than you. But up and down the show, I at least enjoyed basically everything. And there were some real highlights here. The main event, I don't think reached like top main event level status, but it was very good. I thought there were two really good tag team matches. And there was other fun stuff in between. And I think the direction is good. So I think this is I would still call it a B show, even though I think it had a pretty like big main event. But considering all the people that were missing and stuff, but a high quality B show is what I would just call this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I largely agree, because it's a show that it's almost like a hidden gem of a show, where I wouldn't call it like, I don't think it will make my best of the year awards at the end of the year for like best show. It won't be in the running, but it is a show that like it's pretty good, and it's not remembered in part because I think of where it falls, right? Where it's not very long after this run of 8 huge ROH shows, with the fifth year festival and then the 2 WrestleMania weekend shows, and then it coming up in just 1 or 2 shows, we're going to go on this another big, like, newsworthy, historically important 3-show run of Colt Cabana and a bunch of other people's farewell. The show after, where all the TNA guys have been pulled in, and Bryan Danielson returns after being gone for almost like 4 or 5 months. And then the show after that's ROH's debut on pay-per-view. And so this show's almost like this weird island where, yeah, a lot of the guys that were usually around at this point aren't there for various reasons, and they're kind of in that rebuilding phase where they're setting up like the next round of stories. But it's a good show, and like you said, I like the direction. We're now at the point where they've got some things that are starting to cook, like the Evans. We are now firmly in the not the Evans, but the Steen and Generico Briscoes feud. It's not just the start. We're now in it. We kind of start the Nigel's quest for the world title thing here. Faction Warfare isn't going to be great, but the No Remorse Corps was really good tonight. There's some. It's a good little island in a sea between other large islands. I don't know. Anyway,
good saying. It's a good saying, Trevor. Let's make it stick.
So that brings us to the end of the show. As always, plugs. ThROH@gmail.com. That is THROH for through. Why do I spell it when you already know the spelling? If you subscribe to the podcast, I don't know. I do it. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. Blue Sky, we have the same handles. Just search for them and you yell at me for posting on Twitter still. And next time on the show, we will be covering the start of the next double shot, the Battle of St. Paul, which Austin Aries takes on Morishima for the world title in a match that is going to be interesting just from the size difference. And on top of that, the Chikara Crew makes their RH debut because we're going to get Mike Quackenbush and company. A bunch of his students are in tow, and so that'll be interesting, plus all sorts of other stuff. I bet you Wade Keller will have thoughts because that's in his backyard, and Wade Keller thoughts are always fun. Should be a great time. And
that's what I'm looking forward to the most, I think.
And then, after that show, like I mentioned, is that 3-show stretch I just described. So we're entering like another really fun era, little chunk of Through the Years come up as things heat up in the weather mat. They're heating up on the show. So until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.